Welcome to MrDantello's Scary Stories channel, where the night feels a little quieter. Tonight, we explore scary stories from abandoned places and lost locations, perfect for drifting into sleep. If you enjoy the stories, like, subscribe, and comment where you're listening from. Let the stories begin. Story 1. Beneath the rotting floorboards of Camp Everstill. I didn't believe in ghosts, not really. I believed in trauma, in memory, in the way old places hold on to pain like dampness in wood. But I didn't believe in spirits that lingered, watching, waiting, least of all in a place as forgotten as Camp Everstill. It was supposed to be temporary, just a summer job, groundskeeper, caretaker, whatever you wanted to call it, for a camp that hadn't seen children since the late 80s. The pay was laughable, but the rent was free. A small cabin near the edge of Blackwater Lake, nestled between pines so dense they choked out the sun by mid-afternoon. I needed somewhere quiet to disappear for a while, somewhere without Wi-Fi, without neighbors, without the constant hum of a city that never let me forget what I'd done. The listing was posted on a regional job board under seasonal maintenance remote location. No photos, just coordinates and a phone number. The voice on the other end was elderly, female, with a smoker's rasp and zero patience. "You know how to use an axe?" she asked. "Yeah," I lied. "Good. Cabin's got a wood stove, roof leaks in the east corner, floors soft in the back room. Don't step there unless you want to meet God early." She hung up before I could ask about the camp's history. I arrived at dusk. The drive-in was a nightmare. Narrow dirt roads swallowed by overgrowth, branches scraping the sides of my truck like skeletal fingers. When I finally broke through the tree line, Camp Everstill sprawled before me like a corpse half buried in moss. Dozens of cabins, most collapsed or leaning drunkenly into the earth. A mess hall with shattered windows, a boathouse sagging into the lake. And beyond it all, the water, still, black, reflecting nothing but the bruised sky. My cabin, Cabin 7, was one of the few still standing upright. It smelled of wet rot and mouse droppings when I pushed open the door. Inside, a rusted wood stove, a cot with a mildewed mattress, a table with 2 chairs, and a single oil lamp hanging from a hook in the ceiling. The floorboards groaned under my weight, especially toward the back, where the woman had warned me not to step. One plank near the far wall was visibly sunken, its edges splintered and dark with moisture. I dropped my duffel bag by the door and lit the lamp. Shadows leapt across the walls, stretching long and thin like grasping hands. Outside, the wind picked up, whispering through the pines. It sounded almost like voices. That first night, I slept fitfully. Every creak of the cabin, every rustle in the underbrush jolted me awake. Around 2 a.m., I heard something new, a low rhythmic thumping from beneath the floor, like someone tapping a stick against wood. Steady, patient. I sat up, heart pounding, and held my breath. The sound stopped. Morning brought relief. Sunlight filtered weakly through the trees, painting stripes across the dusty floor. I spent the day clearing brush around the main lodge, chopping deadfall for the stove, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling that I was being watched. The lake never rippled, not once. Even when the wind gusted hard enough to rattle the shutters, the surface remained glassy, smooth, unnaturally calm. That's when I found the journal. Tucked beneath a loose floorboard near the stove, clearly pried up before, was a water-stained notebook bound in leather. The pages were brittle, ink faded to brown, but legible. It belonged to someone named Eleanor Voss, a camp counselor in the summer of 1987. June 14th. Kids are restless. Too much rain? They keep talking about the girl in the lake. Said they saw her last night during flashlight tag. Pale face just below the surface, eyes wide open. Told them it was just a log or a fish. But little Timmy won't stop crying. Says she whispered his name. June 22nd. Something's wrong with cabin 7, the floor in the back room. It's warm, even when the rest of the cabin is freezing. And there's a smell, sweet like rotting fruit. Checked underneath today, nothing but mud and roots. But the ground feels hollow. July 3rd. They're digging again, in the woods behind the boathouse. I didn't tell anyone, but I followed them last night. 4 of the older boys, led by Danny Reeves. They had shovels. Said they were looking for treasure. But they weren't laughing, they were scared. When I called out, they ran. Left the hole half dug. I went closer. There was something at the bottom, wrapped in burlap. I didn't touch it. July 10th. Eleanor's handwriting grew jagged, frantic. They took her. The girl from cabin 3, Sarah Miller, vanished during the storm last night. Search party found her shoe by the dock. Nothing else. Sheriff says she drowned. But I saw Danny this morning. He had mud on his boots, and he wouldn't look me in the eye. July 12th. I went to the sheriff. Showed him the hole in the woods. He laughed, said kids dig holes all the time. But I know what I saw. That burlap wasn't empty. July 15th, last entry. They're watching me now. From the trees, from the lake, even from inside the cabin. I hear scratching under the floor at night. Not mice. Something bigger, something that breathes. I'm leaving tomorrow. I can't stay here. If you find this, don't trust the silence, don't trust the stillness. Camp Everstill isn't empty. It's full of what they buried and what they didn't bury deep enough. I close the journal slowly, my hands trembling. 1987, 39 years ago. Sarah Miller, Danny Reeves, names I'd never heard before, yet they clung to me like cobwebs. That night, I nailed a plank over the soft spot in the floor, just in case. The knocking started at midnight. Not tapping, not scratching. Full, heavy knocks, like a fist pounding from below. Boom, boom, boom. Each one shook. The cot. I grabbed the axe I'd been using to split wood and stood over the patched floorboards, sweat slick on my palms. "Who's there?" My voice cracked. Silence. Then a slow, wet drag across the underside of the floor, like something dragging itself through mud. It circled the cabin, stopping directly beneath my feet. I didn't sleep. By dawn, I was exhausted, paranoid, jumping at shadows. I decided to investigate the woods behind the boathouse. Armed with the axe and a flashlight, I pushed through ferns and brambles until I found it, a shallow depression, overgrown but unmistakable. The hole Eleanor mentioned. I dug. Just a few inches down, my shovel hit something soft. Fabric. Burlap. Rotted but intact. My stomach turned. I peeled it back with the tip of the axe. Bones. Small. Human. A child's femur. A fragment of a skull, and tangled in the remains. A faded blue hair ribbon, identical to the one described in local news archives I looked up on my phone the night before. Sarah Miller's favorite color was blue. I stumbled back, bile rises in my throat. I needed to call the police. But my phone had no signal. Never had since I arrived. I ran back to the cabin, planning to drive into town. But my truck wouldn't start. The battery was dead. though it had been fine yesterday. The fuel line was clogged with something thick and black like tar. Trapped. That evening, the lake began to ripple, not from wind, from something moving beneath the surface. Slow, deliberate circles spreading outward from the center. I watched from the porch, axe in hand, as the ripples grew closer to shore, closer to the dock. Then a shape emerged, pale, bloated, hair floating like seaweed, a face, childlike, distorted by decades underwater, turned toward me, eyes milky white, mouth open in a silent scream. I slammed the cabin door, locked it, shoved the table against it. My breath came in ragged gasps. Outside, the ripples stopped. Silence returned, but the knocking beneath the floor began again, louder, faster. Boom, 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 boom. And then a voice, gurgling, wet, as if spoken through a throat full of lake water. "Let me in." I recognized it from the journal. "Sarah Miller." "No," I whispered. "You're not real. You're dead." "I'm cold," the voice sobbed. "So cold. Let me warm up." The floorboard I'd nailed down began to lift. Splinters popped. Nails screeched as they tore free. From the widening gap, a hand emerged, gray, webbed with algae, fingers too long, nails blackened and sharp. It clawed at the air, reaching for me. I swung the axe. It bit deep into the wrist. Black fluid oozed out, steaming as it hit the floorboards. The hand jerked back with a shriek that wasn't human. It was the sound of drowning, of suffocation, of a child trapped in darkness for 39 years. Silence fell. I collapsed against the wall, shaking, covered in sweat and that foul-smelling fluid. Dawn came. The hand was gone. The floorboard lay flat again, as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. I spent the next 3 days trying to escape. Walked 5 miles through the woods only to circle back to the lake. Tried signaling planes with a mirror. None flew overhead. The camp was sealed off, as if the forest itself refused to let me leave. On the 4th night, I heard singing, a child's voice, clear and sweet, drifting from the lake. "Row, row, row your boat." I peered through the window. Dozens of figures stood waist-deep in the water, pale, bloated, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Children, all of them, holding hands, swaying gently. And at the center, Sarah Miller, pointing toward my cabin. They knew I was here. That's when I understood. Camp Everstill wasn't haunted by one ghost. It was a graveyard, a dumping ground. Not just Sarah, but others, kids who vanished. During storms, during hikes, during accidents, the camp covered up. And whatever was beneath my floor, it wasn't just Sarah. It was the thing that pulled them under, the thing that lived in the hollow beneath the cabin, the thing that fed on silence and stillness. I tried burning the cabin down, set fire to the mattress, but the flames died instantly, as if smothered by invisible hands. Now I write this by lamplight, listening to the floor breathe beneath me. The knocking has stopped, but the dragon hasn't. It's closer now, right under my chair. I can feel the heat rising through the boards, that same warmth Eleanor described, sweet rot, damp earth, hunger. They don't want me to leave. They want me to join them, to become part of the stillness, to sink into the hollow beneath the rotting floorboards of Camp Everstill and never move again. And that's where this story ends. Let's move on to the next one. Every room on floor 13 held an empty chair facing the window. I took the job at the Grand Meridian because the rent on my studio apartment was due, and the only other offer I'd gotten that week was cleaning cat urine out of a meth lab for $20 an hour. The ad was clipped from a physical newspaper, the Portland Chronicle, dated 1998, and taped to a bulletin board in the back of a pawn shop that smelled of gun oil and despair. Night watchman needed. Grand Meridian Hotel. $200 cash week. Must start immediately. No questions asked. The address led me to a decaying Art Deco tower on the edge of what used to be Portland's theater district, now a graveyard of boarded-up cinemas and abandoned speakeasies swallowed by weeds. The Grand Meridian hadn't operated as a hotel since 1973, when a fire in the penthouse suite killed 17 guests. The top 3 floors had been sealed off by court order. The rest of the building was a skeleton, held together by pigeon nests and rust. The man who hired me didn't give his name. He called himself the caretaker. He met me in the lobby at 11 p.m., a gaunt figure in a moth-eaten velvet smoking jacket, his face half hidden in shadow beneath a bowler hat. His hands were spotted with age, but his grip was iron when he pressed a heavy brass key into my palm. 12 midnight to 6 a.m., he rasped, his voice like gravel under tires. Patrol floors 1 through 12. Log any disturbances in the ledger. Do not go above the 12th floor, and whatever you hear from 13, ignore it. What's on 13? I asked. My breath fogged in the unheated lobby. He didn't answer, just pointed a bony finger at the elevator bank. The service lift, only one that works. It stops at 12. The button for 13 is covered. Keep it covered. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and the chairs. Chairs? Every room on 13 has one, an armchair, facing the window. Don't touch them. Don't sit in them. Don't even look at them too long. He adjusted his hat, his eyes glinting in the dim emergency light. They're not empty. The elevator groaned as it ascended, its cables shrieking like tortured metal. The lobby vanished behind brass doors etched with tarnished peacocks. Floor after floor of darkness slid past the indicator dial 1, 2, 3. By floor 7, the light bulbs in the hallway were all shattered, leaving only the moonlight bleeding through grimy windows to cast long, distorted shadows. I stepped out on 12, the highest floor I was allowed. The air was thick with dust and the smell of dry rot. My footsteps echoed on marble floors cracked like broken ice. My room, a converted linen closet, was barely big enough for a cot and a hot plate, but it was warm, and it was free. I didn't sleep. I sat by the door, listening. At 1:17 a.m., the scratching started, not from the walls, from above. A slow, deliberate scrape of wood on wood, like a chair, being dragged across a floor. It came from floor 13. I pressed my ear to the ceiling tiles. Beneath the scraping was a sound like breathing, wet, labored, hungry. I told myself it was rats. Rats in the walls, rats in the ceiling, rats in the hollow spaces where 17 people had burned. At 3:03 a.m., the chair scraped again. Closer this time, right above my room. Then silence, a silence so deep it pressed against my eardrums. And in that silence, a whisper. Not words, just a sigh that carried a weight of decades of smoke and sorrow. I lasted 3 nights. On the 4th night, the power died. The emergency lights flickered once, then died, plunging the 12th floor into absolute darkness. My flashlight beam cut a shaky path down the hallway as I checked room doors. All locked, all quiet, until I reached the service elevator. Its doors were open, not just open, jammed open. The brass paneling was dented inward, as if something heavy had thrown itself against it from the other side. And on the floor of the elevator cab, illuminated by my trembling light, sat a single item, a blue plastic key card, the kind hotels use for room access. It was pristine, unblemished. Unlike the Grand Meridian's decaying interiors, this card looked brand new. On its face, stamped in crisp white letters, "For Hotel Torre." I shouldn't have picked it up, but I did. It was warm, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. The elevator buttons were covered in grime, but one was cleaner than the others. The cover over the 13 button had been torn off. Beneath it, the button glowed a sickly green. My finger hovered over it. The key card throbbed in my palm. They're not empty. I pressed the button. The elevator lurched upward with a sound like bone snapping. The cables screamed. Dust rained from the ceiling. The indicator dial spun wildly. 12, 13, and stopped. The doors shuddered open. Floor 13 wasn't burned. It was preserved. Moonlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating a hallway frozen in 1973. Plush, crimson carpet, gilt-framed paintings of stormy seas, crystal sconces coated in a fine layer of ash, but intact, and the smell, not mildew, not smoke, but lavender and beeswax, like a room kept immaculate for guests who never arrived. Every door stood open. Every room held a single armchair, facing the window. They weren't fancy chairs, just sturdy wooden frames with faded floral upholstery, but they were occupied, not by people, by presence. The air above each chair shimmered like heat haze off asphalt, and in that shimmer, shapes coalesced. A woman's hand resting on the armrest, a man's shoulder hunched against the cold, a child's knee drawn up to their chest. Translucent, flickering, waiting. I stepped into room 101. My boots sank into the thick carpet. The chair faced a window overlooking the city skyline, now choked with fog. On the seat, cushion lay a pair of spectacles, one lens cracked. On the floor beside it, a woman's pearl earring. I bent to pick it up. The whisper hit me like a physical blow. "Don't turn around." The voice was dry, papery, layered with a crackle of old flames. It came from the chair, from the space where a head would rest. I froze. My hand hovered over the earring. "They watch through the glass." The whisper continued. "They wait for someone to sit, to take the place of the one who left, to fill the emptiness." Who left? My voice was a croak. The fireman. He pulled me out. But not the others, not my Edward, not little Clara. He saved me, and I watched them burn from the street. I couldn't bear it. So I came back. I sat in the chair, and they let me stay. A pause. The shimmer above the chair deepened, darkening. But the chair must be filled, always. I backed out of the room, down the hall. Every chair faced the window. Every shimmer held a shape. A man in a tuxedo, his face half melted. A child clutching a charred teddy bear. A woman in a flapper dress, her hair floating as if underwater. They didn't look at me. They looked through me, out the windows, at the city that had forgotten them. Room 1313 stood at the end of the hall. Its door was slightly ajar. Moonlight bled through the crack, painting a silver stripe on the carpet. I pushed it open. The room was identical to the others. Same floral wallpaper, same brass bed frame, same armchair facing the window. But this chair was different. It was empty, truly empty. No shimmer, no presence, just dust motes dancing in the moonlight. And on the seat cushion, a single item, a firefighter's helmet, blackened, scorched. The number, 417, stenciled on the brim. I knew that number. My father had been firefighter Chapter 17. He'd died pulling survivors from the Grand Meridian blaze. He'd saved 12 people, not 17. He'd carried out a woman in a lavender dress, Mildred Calloway, the newspapers later said, but left behind her husband and daughter when the stairwell collapsed. He'd never forgiven himself. He'd drowned the guilt in whiskey for 20 years until his liver gave out. I'd been 12 when they lowered his casket into the ground. The only thing I kept was his old helmet, stored in a box under my bed. The key card in my pocket burned cold. They want you to sit. I backed out of room 1313, slamming the door shut. The elevator wouldn't come. The button refused to light. I took the emergency stairs, the metal steps groaning under my weight. Halfway down, I heard it, a sound that stopped me dead. Scrape. A chair dragging across carpet. Scrape! Closer now. From the 14th floor landing, I ran. Down to 12. Down to 11. Burst into the lobby at 5:48 a.m., gasping, covered in dust and sweat. The caretaker stood by the front desk, polishing a brass bell with a rag. He didn't look up. "You went up," he said. Flat. Certain. I couldn't speak. Just nodded. He sighed, the sound like wind through tombstones. "They always do, the ones with ghosts of their own." He set down the bell. "Your father was a good man, braver than he knew. He saved Mildred Calloway, but he carried Edward and Clara with him until the end. The chairs, they don't just hold the dead, they hold the living who can't let go." "How do you know about my father?" He finally met my eyes. His pupils were black pits. I was Edward Calloway, Mildred's husband. The fire took my body, the guilt took hers. She sat in that chair for 30 years until you came. Your grief, it's a beacon. They smell it on you like blood and water." He tapped the desk ledger. "Sign out, take your money, but know this. The chair in 1313 isn't empty anymore. It's waiting for you to come home." I signed, took the cash, drove straight to the Greyhound station, bought a ticket to Phoenix, slept in my seat for 3 days, jumping at every whisper of brakes, every flicker of passing headlights on the bus window. I found a job washing dishes in a diner, rented a tiny apartment above a laundromat. No mirrors, no chairs facing windows. I covered the windows with blackout curtains, slept with the lights on. For 6 months, it worked. Then the headache started, a dull throb behind my left eye, the smell of smoke in my coffee, the sound of scraping wood in the dead of night. I'd wake to find my apartment freezing, my breath fogging the air, and on the floor beside my bed, a single pearl earring. Last Tuesday I found a chair, not in my apartment, in the alley behind the diner, an old wooden armchair, its floral upholstery faded to gray. Facing the brick wall, I kicked it over, screaming at the night sky. The next morning, it was back, upright, waiting. I quit my job, packed a duffel bag, drove until the desert gave way to mountains. Checked into a roadside motel in Idaho, room 8. No view, just a blank wall. I wedged a chair under the doorknob, piled dresser drawers against the window. At 3:13 a.m., I woke to the smell of lavender. The room was cold. Moonlight streamed through the window I'd barricaded, and there, in the center of the room, sat the chair. Not the motel's flimsy plastic one. The armchair from room 1313, its wood gleamed in the moonlight. On the seat cushion lay my father's helmet. Scorched. Number 413, clear, in the soot. The scraping started. Not from the chair, from inside. My skull. Scrape, 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 like wood on bone. I covered my ears, sang nursery rhymes, recited grocery lists. Nothing drowned it out. The scraping grew louder, sharper, until it wasn't scraping anymore. It was tapping. Fingernails on glass, from the window. I turned. My father stood on the other side of the glass, not as I remembered him, young, strong, smelling of soap and sawdust. This was the man from his funeral photos, gaunt, hollow-eyed, his uniform soaked in phantom sweat and soot. He pressed a palm against the window pane. His mouth moved. No sound came through the glass, but I knew the words. He'd whispered them to me the night before he died, drunk on cheap bourbon. I should have gone back for them. Behind him, in the motel parking lot, stood others, Mildred Calloway in her lavender dress, Edward, his face smooth and unmarked, little Clara, clutching her teddy bear, all facing my window, all waiting. The tapping stopped. My father's hand slid down the glass, pointing not at me, at the chair. Scrape. The chair moved, just an inch, toward the window. I knew then I couldn't run. Not from this. The grief I carried, the guilt over not visiting his grave, not keeping his promises, not being the son he wanted, it wasn't just mine, it was theirs. A debt passed down, a vacancy that needed filling. I stood up, my legs shook, the room tilted. I walked to the chair. The wood was warm. The floral pattern felt familiar under my fingers, like the armchair in our old living room, the one he'd fallen asleep in, watching football games. I sat down. The scraping stopped. The cold lifted. The smell of lavender faded, replaced by wood smoke and damp earth. Moonlight warmed my face. Outside the window, my father smiled. Not the broken smile of his last years, the smile from my childhood photos, the one that crinkled the corners of his eyes. He raised a hand. Not in farewell, in thanks. Mildred took his arm. Edward lifted Clara onto his shoulders. They turned away from the window, walking toward the mountains, their forms dissolving into the morning mist like smoke. The room grew quiet, peaceful. I closed my eyes. The last thing I felt was the chair rocking gently beneath me, not from the wind, from something breathing in the space behind me, something that had waited 40 years for this moment, something that would keep waiting. When the motel maid found a room at noon, the chair was empty, facing the window. The blackout curtains were drawn back. Sunlight streamed across the worn carpet. On the seat cushion lay a firefighter's helmet, blackened but clean, and beside it a single pearl earring. The ledger at the front desk showed no record of my stay, but on the 13th floor of the Grand Meridian Hotel in room 1313, the caretaker placed a fresh key card on the desk. It glowed faintly in the gloom, on its face stamped in crisp white letters. Thirtimofti. He carried it up the service elevator, past the covered button, to the silent floor where every window held a view of a city that had moved on. He placed the card on the armchair in room 13 Moronen, a chair that hadn't been there yesterday. It faced the window, waiting. That brings this story to a close. Let's carry on to the next one. I found a hidden room behind my mirror. Someone was living there. I inherited the apartment from my great-aunt Beatrice, a woman whose life had been a meticulous study in quiet routine right up until the point where she wasn't quiet anymore. It was a pre-war brownstone unit, 3 floors up, with impossibly high ceilings, crown molding that looked like carved icing, and a labyrinthine heating system that hissed and groaned like a sleeping dragon. The whole place smelled faintly of mothballs and old dry paper, and while it was beautiful, it was undeniably old, full of architectural secrets and the kind of strange permanent shadows that modern lighting couldn't seem to dispel. I moved in because the rent was non-existent, and because I, too, enjoyed the quiet routine that the building seemed to enforce. The apartment's master bathroom was particularly strange. It was large and overly ornate for a bathroom, featuring a clawfoot tub and a massive, antique-looking mirror that dominated the entire wall above the pedestal sink. The mirror was huge, framed in dark, heavy carved oak, and it was bolted directly into the plaster. It wasn't the kind of mirror you could simply lift and move. It felt like a fixture, a permanent portal in the room's history. I tried to clean it, but the glass had an inherent subtle distortion, a kind of rippling imperfection that made my reflection seem slightly warped, stretched, or sometimes just out of sync with my movements. I put it down to the age of the glass and the silver backing, but I always felt an unpleasant chill when I stood too close to it, a strange, localized cold spot that lingered no matter how high I cranked the radiator. It was that cold spot that first became a nuisance and then a horrifying clue. I am a meticulous person, a creature of habit and order, and I hate inefficiency. The draft, or whatever it was wasting my heat. I started my investigation with a thermal gun, the kind used for home energy audits. The plaster wall around the mirror registered a consistent 72 degrees, the room temperature. But the exact center of the mirror, the focal point where my reflection's face usually was, registered a baffling 58 degrees. It was a localized, persistent cold, not a draft, but a chill coming from inside the wall. Intrigued, I tapped the glass. The sound was solid near the edges, a heavy, dull thud of glass against plaster. But as I moved my knuckles toward the cold spot, the thud changed. It became hollower, lighter, an echoing, unsettling tap, tap, tap that suggested a significant, unsupported cavity behind the frame. I ran my hand over the oak frame, feeling for a hinge or a latch, but the thing was bolted down with iron screws that had been painted over and sealed with layers of glossy enamel. I decided I had to see what was back there. It was likely a bricked-up chimney flue, a long-forgotten service shaft, or maybe just a clumsy repair job. I told myself it was for the sake of energy efficiency. It took me 3 hours with a screwdriver, a utility knife, and a lot of swearing to chip away the paint and pry the decorative molding off the mirror's frame. The frame itself was held in place by 4 enormous heavy-gauge bolts sunk deep into the wall. As I loosened the last one, the massive mirror gave a shudder and pitched forward an inch, revealing a shocking amount of dust and grime and a thin, dark line of shadow between the frame and the wall. I slowly, carefully, lowered the mirror onto the bathroom floor, the glass reflecting the ceiling and the frantic, pale image of my own face. What was revealed was not a bricked-up flue, but an archway. It was a small, crudely cut opening in the plaster and lath, roughly the size of a man's torso, almost perfectly centered where the cold spot had been. The edges of the opening were ragged, showing the inner structure of the wall, but there was no plaster dust on the floor below it. That meant the opening had been there for a long time. The biggest shock, however, was what the opening led to. It didn't lead to darkness or a void or the back of a chimney. It led to a space that was clearly a room. I shone the flashlight of my phone into the cavity. It wasn't a standard crawl space. It was a narrow, elongated room, maybe 6 feet wide and 15 feet long, running parallel to the bathroom wall and extending into the dead space between my apartment and the building's main staircase, or maybe another unit. The walls were unfinished brick, and the floor was covered in a layer of old, fine, metallic-smelling dust, the kind that accumulates in forgotten, unventilated spaces. But the dust had been disturbed. There was a clear, swept pathway leading from the opening deeper into the dark. And then I saw the objects. The first thing I registered was a sleeping cot, a simple canvas military-style bed positioned in the furthest corner. It was neatly made, but the pillow was dented, the blanket slightly rumpled, a clear sign of recent use. Next to the cot, there was a makeshift shelf fashioned from a piece of old wood placed atop 2 stacked bricks, and on that shelf a few personal items: a small tarnished silver cup, a worn, paper-covered book that I couldn't make out the title of, and next to the shelf, tucked discreetly against the wall, a 5-gallon plastic bucket, presumably for sanitary purposes. But the detail that locked the horror in my throat, freezing the air in my lungs, was the tray. Placed near the opening, directly facing where the mirror had been, was a small silver-rimmed tea tray. On it sat a ceramic plate with half a tuna salad sandwich, neatly cut and covered with a piece of plastic wrap. It wasn't moldy. The bread hadn't gone stale. It had been left there at most a few hours prior. Someone was living here. Someone had been living here today. I took a step back, the phone slipping in my sweaty hand. The person who lived here was not a vagrant who had broken in. This room was an architectural anomaly, a permanent hidden space accessed through a secret hole in my wall, a hole that was covered by a massive, centuries-old mirror. The occupant had to have known the architecture, had to have a key, or an incredible talent for stealth. Then my eyes snapped back to the opening, and specifically to the inner side of the mirror frame that was now resting on my floor. I ran my fingers over the glass. On the side that had faced the wall where the archway was, there was a patch of clear, pristine glass about the size of a small window pane. The rest of the backing was opaque and silvery, but this one section had been chemically stripped, replaced by a specialized translucent film. It wasn't a mirror on that side at all. It was a cleverly disguised one-way window. The realization hit me like a physical blow, a rush of nausea that made the already close air of the bathroom feel suffocating. I hadn't just been looking at my reflection for the past 2 months. I had been observed. Every morning, shaving, brushing my teeth, staring into the glass, I hadn't been alone. The person inside had been watching me, their cot positioned perfectly so that my face, my routine, the minutiae of my solitary life were their entertainment, their window to the outside world. The slight distortion I had always complained about was the result of the crude one-way film, not the age of the glass. The cold spot was their breathing, their body temperature, their proximity to the pain. I scrambled out of the bathroom, shutting the door and locking it with a desperate, frantic click of the cheap brass bolt. I called the police. When they arrived, they were skeptical. They were thorough, though, and they crawled into the space. They found the cot, the bucket, the shelf. But the sandwich was gone. The plate was empty. wiped clean. The book was closed and pushed further back on the shelf. The police found no fingerprintable surfaces, no documents, no evidence of a crime beyond trespassing. They theorized it was a transient, a squatter who knew the old building's layout, who had been hiding there, and who had fled when I started removing the mirror. They taped off the area, filed a report that mentioned a likely unhoused individual, and left. I knew they didn't believe the part about the one-way mirror, suggesting I was overreacting due to the shock. I didn't replace the mirror. I couldn't. Instead, I boarded up the archway with 2x4s and several layers of drywall, sealing the opening with a thick coat of plaster, the smell of which was meant to replace the metallic dust I had smelled. I tried to convince myself it was over, that the person had fled the building, but the knowledge of the hidden room had irrevocably altered my reality. That's when the sounds began. They weren't coming from the sealed-up mirror room, or at least not only from there. They came from the walls, not the loud, familiar creaks of an old building settling, but soft, dry, insidious noises. A faint, rhythmic scrabbling like fingernails on dusty plaster, or the movement of a tiny animal, but too controlled, too deliberate to be a mouse. A soft, measured thump-tap slide, a sound that seemed to be traveling in the dead spaces between the joists, the service shafts, and the vertical pipes of the ancient heating system. I would be reading in my living room, and the sound would be directly behind the bookcase. I would be in my kitchen, and it would seem to emanate from the space between the cupboard and a wall. I realized the mirror room wasn't the person's only space. It was their observatory. Their home was the entire forgotten, hidden infrastructure of the building, a complex, dark network of architectural dead space that was only accessible to someone impossibly small, flexible, and utterly silent. They were living in the negative space of the brownstone like a parasite in the host's body, and my apartment was merely one visible surface of their sprawling, invisible habitat. The terror became an exquisite, personalized form of psychological torture. My things would be subtly moved. I would leave my wallet on the hall table and later find it pushed half an inch further toward the wall. I'd be certain I'd close the window latch before leaving for work, only to find it slightly ajar when I returned. One evening I reached for my toothbrush and noticed it was distinctly wet when I knew I hadn't used it for hours. These were not the signs of a burglar or a vandal. They were the signs of an intimate observer, someone who had learned my habits so well they could use the briefest moments of my absence to slip out, move freely, and then retreat back into the silent, dusty labyrinth. The ultimate psychological attack came one night when I was asleep. I woke up suddenly with that visceral jolt of someone watching you. The room was black, silent, the kind of absolute darkness that presses down on your eyelids. I held my breath, listening, the frantic hammering of my own heart deafening in my ears. And then I heard it, a soft, dry, almost papery cough that came from the wall directly behind my headboard. It was the cough of a person, but one whose lungs were choked with old dust and the dry air of unventilated space. It was right there. I shot out of bed, slammed on the light, and stared at the beige, innocuous wall. Nothing. No vent, no crack, no seam. Just the solid, painted plaster. I stopped trying to escape the reality. I accepted terrible truth. I was sharing my life with an elegant, silent shadow. a forgotten dweller of the city's unseen spaces who used my apartment as a source of warmth and human observation. I went to the sealed-up bathroom. The freshly plastered archway looked solid, but I could hear a faint, high-pitched, scritching sound coming from within the wall. I grabbed a Sharpie and a piece of paper, and I taped the note to the newly painted wall directly over where the one-way mirror had been. The words were a mix of desperation and challenge. "Who are you? Please, stop. Why are you here? You need help." The next morning, the note was gone. The tape was still there, a pale frame around nothing. In its place, stuck to the plaster with a tiny, nearly invisible dab of what looked like dried mud, was a small, meticulously folded piece of paper, no bigger than a matchbook. I had to use tweezers to retrieve it. The handwriting was thin, elegant, almost spider-like, a script from a forgotten century, yet completely legible. The message was 3 chilling, impossible words. "I am your silent twin. You are too loud." The insult wasn't just in the words. It was in the revelation that my life, my quiet life, was an intolerable racket to this person. My movements, my breathing, the sound of my television, the scraping of my chair, all of it was a cacophony disrupting their perfect, absolute silence. I knew I had to see them. I had to know what kind of human being could exist in such a space. I had to face my silent twin. That night, I waited. I set up my phone on a tripod with the flash off, recording video, and I sat on the floor of the bathroom, a blanket wrapped around me, a heavy wrench lying uselessly beside me. The main lights were off. The only illumination coming from the thin sliver of light beneath the door. Hours passed. The building settled. The heating system finally fell silent. I was a man of routine, and my routine was to sleep. Despite the fear, despite the adrenaline, my body betrayed me. I slumped against the wall, and exhaustion, my old enemy, finally claimed me. I woke with a jolt. The air in the room was suddenly, drastically colder. I hadn't heard a sound. I fumbled for my phone, my hand shaking, and looked at the time. 3:17 a.m. I had been asleep for maybe 20 minutes. I stared at the sealed archway, expecting to see a fresh hole, but the plaster was intact. The scrabbling sound, however, was back, and it was loud, no longer behind the plaster, but right next to me. I realized the sound was coming from the air vent near the floor, the old cast-iron grill on the baseboard that fed the heating system. I spun around, wrench in hand, and focused the dim light of the phone screen on the vent. It wasn't just a sound. The vent cover was slightly ajar, tilted outward at a small, impossible angle, and from the thin black gap created by that angle, something was moving. It was a person, impossibly thin, dressed in layers of old dusty gray fabric that seemed to blend perfectly with the shadows and the dirty plaster. Their face was a pale, wedge-shaped mask, their hair matted with dust, but their eyes were the thing that held me. They were huge, dinner plate-sized, dilated to absolute blackness, reflecting the pinprick of my phone light like twin black mirrors. They were the eyes of a creature accustomed to near absolute, perpetual darkness, eyes that found my faint illumination blinding. They were not menacing. They were terrified. They froze, seeing me, the light, the weapon. For a single, terrifying second, our lives intersected, the man of the light, the man of the dark. And then, with an impossible fluidity, a speed that defied the limits of the human skeleton, the creature slid backward, not running, but smoothly retreating, pulling their thin, dusty body through the narrow ventilation grill. I heard the sound of dry, brittle bones flexing and the rustle of old cloth. The cast-iron grill, which was heavy and usually required a screwdriver to move, pulled itself shut with a soft, decisive click. I sat there for an hour, the light blazing, the wrench still in my hand, staring at the perfectly closed vent. I knew I couldn't report this. I knew the police would institutionalize me. I knew I was not safe. I moved out the next day. I left the furniture, the keys, everything. I moved to a sleek, modern glass and steel apartment tower, a sterile world of new construction where there are no hidden spaces, no old service shafts, no architectural dead zones for a shadow dweller to hide. I live on the 22nd floor, surrounded by sealed walls and new HVAC systems. But I am not free. Every rhythmic thrum of the building's central air conditioning sends a cold wave of panic through me. Every shadow cast by the city lights at night seems to hold a shape that is impossibly thin. I jump at the sound of the elevator moving in the wall, and 1 month ago, a letter was forwarded to my new address from the old brownstone. It was a standard-sized envelope, the paper smelling faintly of ozone and old metallic dust. Inside, there was a single, meticulously folded piece of paper, the same spider-like script. I miss the quiet routine of your sleep. The new walls are too thin. You are still too loud. My terror is now complete. He is not in the walls of the brownstone anymore. He is not a squatter. He is a predator, or perhaps a shadow twin, and he has been following me. He has learned my quiet routine, and I know that somewhere in the dead space between the insulation, the vents, and the concrete of my new modern high-rise, there is a pair of black, dilated eyes watching me, waiting for me to be still enough, quiet enough, for him to slip out and finally introduce himself. And I know with crushing certainty that I will never be truly alone again. That brings this story to a close. Let's carry on to the next one. I woke up in a hospital. The staff won't tell me what year it is. The first sensation was the hum, a low, soft, persistent thrum that seemed to vibrate not just in my ears, but in the very marrow of my bones. It was the sound of a perfectly functioning, utterly sterile machine. The second sensation was the smell, antiseptic, clean to the point of being aggressive, a scent so devoid of organic life it felt like the opposite of breathing. My eyes opened. The world was a uniform, shadowless, milky white. The ceiling, the walls, the thin synthetic blanket covering me, all the same shade of clinical non-color. My name is Mark Thorne. I knew this with a sudden crystalline certainty. I was 34 years old. I was an architect. I was engaged to a woman named Anna, a woman whose laugh sounded like wind chimes and whose hair smelled of lavender and sunshine, and I had been in a car accident. The memory came back in a jagged, violent flash, the screech of tires on wet asphalt, the blinding glare of headlights where they shouldn't be, the sickening concussive crunch of metal, and Anna's hand, suddenly weightless in my own. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed its way up my throat. I tried to sit up, but my body refused to obey. It felt like a borrowed suit, heavy and disconnected. A soft, pleasant chime sounded somewhere in the room, and a woman appeared at my bedside. She was dressed in the same seamless white as the room, her features calm and symmetrical, her smile gentle but utterly unreadable. A name tag on her chest read, Elara, Cognitive Support. "Welcome back, Mark," she said, her voice as smooth and placid as a still lake. "It's good to see you awake. Please, do not be alarmed. You are safe." "Anna," I rasped, my throat feeling like sandpaper. "My fiancée. Was she—" Elara's smile didn't waver. "All will be made clear in time. For now, your focus must be on recovery. Your body has been dormant for a significant period. We must reestablish your baseline functions." Her words were like pillows, soft and designed to smother any hard, sharp questions. But one question pushed its way through the fog of my confusion. It felt like the most important question in the world, the anchor I needed to tether myself to reality. "How long?" I asked. "How long have I been out?" She took a small silver device from her pocket and ran it over my chest. A soft, green light pulsed from it. "Your vital signs are stabilizing nicely. That's a very positive indicator." "You didn't answer my question," I said, a flicker of irritation cutting through my weakness. "The concept of how long is relative, Mark," she said, her placid expression unwavering. "Temporal awareness can be disorienting after a significant trauma. Our priority is your cognitive and physiological well-being. We will address all your questions during your scheduled sessions." She tapped a small, almost invisible panel on the wall, and a tray slid out, holding a small bowl of a thick beige paste. "Your nutrient intake is critical at this stage. Please consume this. It has everything your body needs." I stared at the paste, then back at her. Her refusal to answer was so deliberate, so unnatural. It wasn't that she didn't know. It was that she wouldn't say. A new, colder fear began to snake its way around the hot core of my grief for Anna. "What year is it?" I asked, the words stark and loud in the quiet room. Elara's smile finally faltered, just for a fraction of a second. A tiny micro-expression of something. Annoyance? Pity? It was gone as quickly as it came. "That is not a productive question at this stage of your recovery, Mark. We find that focusing on the present moment yields the best results. Now, please, your nutrients." She left the room as silently as she had entered. I was alone with the humming, the antiseptic smell, the beige paste, and a profound, terrifying sense of dislocation. It was the first day of my new life, a life in which the simple act of asking for the date was considered an unproductive question. The days that followed blurred into a monotonous, disorienting routine, a life lived in a white box. My physical strength returned with an almost unnatural speed. The nutrient paste, which tasted of nothing at all, seemed to repair my atrophied muscles at a cellular level. A man named Coyle, a physical therapist with the same calm, detached demeanor as Elara, would guide me through exercises that felt both alien and familiar. My body remembered how to move, but it was a distant, echoic memory. My real work, they told me, was in the cognitive sessions with Elara. We would sit in 2 white chairs in my white room, and she would ask me questions. She'd show me images on a tablet, a tree, a house, a dog, and ask me to identify them. At first, it felt like a test for a toddler. But the questions grew more complex, more personal. "Tell me about your childhood home, Mark," she'd say, her pen poised over a data pad. "It was a 2-story colonial on Maple Street," I'd begin. "A big oak tree in the front yard with a tire swing." She would listen patiently, and then she would gently correct me. "Our records indicate it was a single-story ranch house on Elm Avenue. The tree was a sycamore. The memory of a tire swing is a common confabulation. a memory echo from a piece of media you likely consumed. It was maddening. Every detail I provided, every memory I held dear, was met with a calm, clinical refutation. They had a file on me, a complete and total record of the life of Mark Thorne. And it was all wrong. My father was a carpenter, not an accountant. My first pet was a cat named Mittens, not a goldfish named Bubbles. Anna and I met in a coffee shop during a rainstorm, not through a university-sponsored social mixer. The trauma of your accident was significant, Mark, Elara explained, her voice dripping with synthetic sympathy. It has created inconsistencies in your neural pathways. Think of your memory as a corrupted file. We are simply helping you restore the original uncorrupted data. We are helping you find yourself again. They were trying to gaslight me into a different life. But why? The more I clung to my own memories, the more they increased the frequency of the sessions. The more they insisted my past was a fiction. My grief for Anna was the one thing I held on to with a white-knuckled grip. It was my proof. My pain was real. Our love was real. They wanted to take that away, too. They called it emotional trauma, an anomaly to be corrected. The hospital, I had no other word for it, was a labyrinth of identical white corridors. There were no windows, not a single one. There was no way to see the sun, the sky, the outside world. There was no way to know if it was day or night. The soft, ambient light in the ceiling never changed. The staff, there were perhaps a dozen of them that I saw, moved with a silent, synchronized efficiency. They all wore the same white uniforms, the same placid smiles. They were like a hive of well-meaning, soulless insects. I never saw another patient. My repeated questions about this were met with the same frustratingly vague responses about individualized recovery protocols. The need to know the year became an obsession, a gnawing, desperate hunger. It was the key. It was the one piece of information that would unlock this whole nightmare. I tried every tactic I could think of. I tried pleading. I tried demanding. I tried feigning a breakdown. Nothing worked. They would simply sedate me with a small, painless injection, and I would wake up in my bed, the lost hours, a terrifying blank space in my mind. The first crack in their perfect white wall came in the form of a child's drawing. I had been permitted a recreational period in a room that was slightly larger than my own, filled with simple geometric objects that were meant to be stimulating. A maintenance panel in the wall was slightly ajar. My curiosity, the one part of me they hadn't managed to sedate, took over. I glanced at the camera in a corner, then quickly pried the panel open. Inside was a tangle of fiber optic cables, and tucked away in a corner, a folded piece of paper. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. It was a drawing done in the clumsy, earnest style of a young child. It depicted a family of stick figures standing under a sky that was a violent, angry shade of orange-red, cracked with jagged black lines. Beneath the drawing, in shaky block letters, was a single phrase, "Before the broken sky." The broken sky. The phrase echoed in my mind, resonating with a deep, primal sense of dread. I tucked the drawing into the waistband of my uniform, my heart pounding. It was a piece of the puzzle. It was proof that something had happened, something terrible, something that they were trying to erase. That night, I faked taking my mandatory sedative. I palmed a small dissolvable tablet and hid it under my tongue until the orderly left. For the first time, I was awake when I was supposed to be asleep. The humming of the facility seemed louder in the artificial night. I slid out of bed and crept to my door. I had no plan, just a desperate need to see something other than the four white walls of my room. The corridor was empty, bathed in the same eternal soft light. I began to walk, my bare feet silent on a cool, seamless floor. I didn't know what I was looking for. A window, a clock, an exit. A soft, scraping sound from a room down the hall made me freeze. I pressed myself against the wall, my breath held tight in my chest. The door was slightly ajar. I peered through the crack. Inside, an old man was on his hands and knees, trying to pry up a floor tile with a spoon he must have stolen from a meal tray. He was gaunt and wild-eyed, his white hair a chaotic halo around his head. He saw me. His eyes widened in terror, and he scrambled back, holding the spoon like a weapon. "Shh," I whispered, holding up my hands. "I'm not one of them." He watched me for a long moment, his chest heaving. Then he seemed to make a decision. "You're new," he rasped, his voice dry and cracked. "The architect. I heard them talking." "My name is Mark," I said. "What is this place?" "This place is a lie," he said, his eyes darting toward the door. "They're trying to correct you, aren't they? Trying to make you forget. Don't let them. The memories are all we have left of what it was like. Before." "Before what?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Before the broken sky." The old man's face went slack with shock. "Where did you hear that?" I showed him the drawing. He stared at it, a single tear tracing a path through the grime on his cheek. "So, you're a digger," he said with a grim, humorless smile. "Like me. They call me Elias. They say I have advanced memory corruption. They say I'm a lost cause." "Elias," I said, "what year is it?" He let out a dry, rattling laugh. "That's the one thing you can't ask. The one thing they protect above all else. Because the number is so big it would break your mind. Because it would prove that everything you were, everyone you knew, is dust." "What happened?" I pleaded. "The accident." "There was no accident," Elias said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Not for most of us. We were chosen. The chrysalis protocol. They put us to sleep, the ones with the skills they thought they'd need to rebuild. Architects, doctors, engineers. We were supposed to be the seed of the new world. But something went wrong. The great silence, they call it. The world outside. It died, and we just kept sleeping for a long, long time." His words were the ravings of a madman, but they resonated with a terrifying intuitive truth. This place wasn't a hospital. It was a bunker, a tomb, and we were the sleeping inhabitants being woken up one by one. "The ones running this place?" I asked. "Who are they?" "The Watchers," he said, his eyes wide. "The descendants of the original staff. They were born here, in the white. They've never seen the sun. They've never felt the rain. The world before is a myth to them, a dangerous, corrupted file, and we are the last living copies of that file. They're trying to wipe us clean, to make us like them before they integrate us." A chime sounded down the hall. Elias scrambled to his feet, his face a mask of terror. "You have to go. They're coming." He pressed the spoon into my hand. "Keep digging, architect," he whispered. "Don't let them win." I fled back to my room, my mind a maelstrom of horrifying new realities. I was a relic, an artifact from a dead world. My memories weren't corrupted. They were history, and the staff of this hospital were book burners trying to erase it. The fight for my past was no longer just a fight for my sanity. It was a fight for the memory of the entire human race. My relationship with my captors changed. I became a model patient. I pretended to accept their corrections. I parroted back the fabricated details of my new life. I ate the paste. I did the exercises. I smiled the same placid, empty smile as them. But beneath the surface, I was a saboteur. I was mapping the corridors in my mind, noting the patrol patterns of the orderlies, looking for a weakness in their perfect white prison. Elias and I began to communicate in secret. We would leave messages for each other behind the loose maintenance panels using a simple code we'd devised. He told me more about the facility, which he called the Janus Cradle. He told me there were different levels. We were in the integration wing. Below us was the hibernation bay, where hundreds, maybe thousands more were still sleeping. Above us was command, where the watchers lived, and somewhere there was an exit, a door to the outside world. Our goal was simple and insane. We had to get out. We had to see the broken sky for ourselves. Elias had a plan. He had been here for years and had managed to steal a low-level key card from a careless orderly. It wouldn't get us to command, but it might get us into the maintenance tunnels that honeycombed the facility. Our chance came during a system-wide diagnostic, a monthly event where the surveillance system was briefly rebooted, leaving small gaps in the camera coverage. The escape was a heart-stopping, terrifying blur. Under the cover of the reboot, we slipped out of our rooms and met in a deserted corridor. Elias swiped the card, and a nearly invisible seam in the wall hissed open, revealing a dark, narrow shaft. We plunged into it, the door hissing shut behind us, sealing us in the dusty, humming darkness of the cradle's guts. The tunnels were a different world. They were dark, cramped, and filled with the ghosts of old technology. Thick bundles of cables coated in a thick layer of gray dust snaked along the walls. Here and there, I saw logos and brand names that were achingly familiar, relics from my own time: General Electric, IBM, Panasonic. They were like fossils from a prehistoric age. We were moving through the skeleton of a dead world. We found a maintenance nexus, a small chamber where several tunnels converged. In the center was a dusty computer terminal, an ancient-looking desktop computer from the early 21st century. It was dead, of course, but beside it, on a shelf, was a stack of leather-bound logbooks. We opened the first one. The entries were handwritten, the ink faded, but still legible. The date on the first page made my breath catch in my throat. October 23rd, 2026. My accident had been in August of 2026. The logbook was the journal of Dr. Eris Thorne, the original director of the Janus Cradle. Not a cold young man who was my doctor, but his ancestor, his namesake. I read his words, my horror growing with every page. He wrote of a world teetering on the brink of collapse, not from war, but from something far more insidious. A series of cascading ecological disasters, a runaway greenhouse effect that was melting the poles and turning the skies a permanent, hazy red. He wrote of the chrysalis protocol, a desperate last-ditch effort to preserve a select group of humanity's best and brightest, to put them to sleep until the earth could heal itself. October 29th, 2026. The great silence has begun. All external communications went dark this morning. We are on our own now. The sky is the color of rust. May God have mercy on the souls of those we left behind. May 12th, 2048. The first of the cradle-born generation has come of age. They have never known a blue sky. They look upon us, the sleepers and the original staff, with a mixture of awe and pity. They call our world the before times. July 3rd, 2091, I am the last of the originals. The others are gone. The cradle-born run this place now. They are good, pragmatic people, but they fear the past. They see the memories of the sleepers not as a history to be preserved, but as a sickness to be cured. They have begun what they call cognitive correction. They believe they are doing a kindness, sparing the newly awakened the grief of a world that is gone forever. I have tried to argue with them, but to them I'm just a sad old man clinging to ghosts. The last entry was dated a week later. The writing was shaky, almost illegible. They are wrong. Memory is not a sickness. It is the only thing that proves we were ever alive at all. I have hidden these logs. Maybe one day one of the sleepers will find them. Maybe one of them will be strong enough to remember for us all. I looked up from the book, my eyes stinging. 100 years. 200. The number didn't matter. Elias was right. The world I knew, the world of Anna, of Maple Street, of blue skies and rainstorms, was not just gone. It was ancient history. A noise from the tunnel behind us made us jump. The sound of footsteps. They knew we were gone. We had to move. We grabbed the logbooks and plunged deeper into the labyrinth. We were lost for what felt like days. We survived on the emergency nutrient packs we found in a forgotten storage closet. The Watchers were hunting us. We could hear their calm, dispassionate voices echoing through the tunnels, calling our names, assuring us that they only wanted to help. It was during our flight that we stumbled upon the nursery. It was a large circular room, filled with rows upon rows of cryogenic pods, far smaller than the ones in the hibernation bay. These were for children, but the most horrifying part was a large glass-walled observation room. Inside, a group of cradle-born children, no older than 5 or 6, were sitting at desks, watching a large screen. On the screen was a pastoral scene from the before times, a family having a picnic in a sunny green field. "Look, children," a soft, synthesized voice was saying, "this is a memory echo. It is a simulation of the corrupted data that the sleepers carry. See how bright the light is? It is unnatural. See how the people laugh? It is a symptom of emotional dysregulation. We must be grateful for the calm, for the balance that we have achieved." They weren't just erasing our memories. They were inoculating their own children against them, teaching them to fear the very concept of our world, to fear happiness, to fear the sun. Elias, his mind already fragile, couldn't take it. He let out a strangled, grief-stricken cry and collapsed, sobbing. The sound alerted our pursuers. They were on us in seconds. They dragged Elias away, his eyes locking with mine in a final, desperate plea. "Remember," his eyes said, "I managed to escape back into the maze of tunnels. I was alone again, hunted, with the weight of a dead world on my shoulders. I knew I couldn't stay in the tunnels forever. My only chance was to go up, to get to command, to find the door. Elias had managed to slip me his stolen key card before they took him. It was a desperate gamble, but I found a sealed access ladder that his card miraculously opened. It led straight up, into the heart of the beast. The command level was a stark contrast to the rest of the cradle. The walls were a dark, polished gray. The air was warmer. This was where the Watchers lived. I crept through the corridors, my heart in my throat. I saw their living quarters, as Spartan and minimalist as my own room. I saw their food synthesizers, their communal learning centers. It was a life of perfect, sterile, passionless order. I found my way to the central control room. It was a vast, circular chamber. The walls were a single panoramic screen, currently displaying the vital signs of the thousands of souls still sleeping in the hibernation bay. In the center of the room, a young man was sitting at a console. It was the man I knew as Dr. Eris. He wasn't in his white uniform. He was wearing a simple gray tunic. He didn't seem surprised to see me. "Mark Thorne," he said, his voice as calm as ever. "The architect. I must admit, you have been our most resilient subject." "Where is Elias?" I demanded, my voice raw. "He has been returned to hibernation," Aris said. "His memory file was too deeply corrupted. Perhaps in a few more generations our techniques will be advanced enough to help him, to cure him." "He wasn't sick," I snarled. "He was remembering a world of chaos, of pain, of uncontrolled emotions that led to its own destruction," Aris countered, his gaze unwavering. "We are offering you a gift, a second chance, a life of purpose, of balance. You can help us build the new world, but first you must let go of the old one." "My world had love," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "It had art. It had Anna." For the first time, I saw a flicker of something in Aris's eyes. It wasn't pity. It was a deep, almost academic curiosity. "Anna," he mused. "The primary emotional trauma, the core of the corruption. Her file is fascinating. The depth of the codependent pathology is unlike anything we have on record." He gestured to the main screen. The vital signs were replaced by a photograph. It was a picture of me and Anna on a beach, laughing, the sun in our hair. The sight of it was a physical blow. "What you call love, we call a destabilizing fixation," Eris said. "It is the very thing we have worked for centuries to eliminate. The world outside is stable now, healed, but it is a delicate, fragile piece. We cannot risk contaminating it with the diseases of the past, with grief, with rage, with love." "I want to see it," I said, my voice a whisper. "I want to see the sky." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "Very well," he said. "You are resilient. Perhaps you are strong enough to see the truth and accept it. Perhaps then you will understand the kindness we are offering." He pressed a sequence of panels on his console. A section of the far wall began to retract, revealing a massive circular airlock door. "This is the main egress," Eris said. "It has not been opened in over 300 years. He led me towards it, my legs feeling like lead. I was about to see it, the broken sky, the world after the great silence. "What year is it, Eris?" I asked one last time. He paused, his hand on the final locking mechanism. "By your old calendar," he said, his voice devoid of all emotion. "The year is 2571, 445 years. The number was so vast, so meaningless, it didn't even register as a shock. It was just a sound." The great door hissed open. A strange, pale light, tinged with a faint violet hue, spilled into the room. A wind, cool and smelling of damp earth and strange alien blossoms, washed over me. I stepped forward, my heart pounding, and looked out upon the world of 2571. It wasn't a wasteland. It wasn't a desert. It was a garden, a strange, beautiful, and utterly alien garden. The sky wasn't broken. It was a soft, perpetual twilight of lavender and rose, a permanent global aurora caused by the altered composition of the atmosphere. The vegetation was lush and bizarre, forests of glowing phosphorescent fungi and trees with leaves of spun silver. In the distance, the ruins of an ancient city, my city, were almost completely consumed by this new, vibrant nature, the skeletal remains of skyscrapers draped in iridescent moss. And the people. There were people moving through the glowing forests. They were tall and slender, their skin almost translucent, their eyes large and dark. They were the cradle-born who had left generations ago to resettle the surface. They were beautiful, peaceful. They moved with a slow, graceful purpose, their faces calm and serene. They were the children of the Watchers, the end result of a program to engineer a new, balanced humanity. And I was a monster, a relic from the age of chaos, a carrier of the emotional plague. The hospital wasn't a prison to keep me in. It was a quarantine to protect them from me. Aris stood beside me. "This is what we have built," he said, his voice filled with a quiet, profound pride. "A world without pain, without grief, without the destructive passions that burned your world to the ground. You can be a part of this, Mark. All you have to do is let her go. Let Anna go." I looked out at the strange, beautiful, silent world. A world without pain, a world without Anna's laugh, a world where the memory of her was a disease. I thought of the logbook. Memory is not a sickness. It is the only thing that proves we were ever alive. I had turned to Eris. His face was a mask of calm expectation. He believed he had won. He believed that seeing this new, perfect world would make me surrender my broken, chaotic past. "No," I said, the word feeling like the first real thing I had said since I woke up. I didn't wait for his reaction. I turned and walked out of the airlock, down the ramp, and into the strange violet twilight of the new earth. I was a ghost, a man out of time, a walking museum of dead emotions. I was utterly, completely alone. But for the first time since I had opened my eyes in that white room, I was free. I didn't know where I was going or what I would do. I only knew that I would not forget. I would carry the memory of Anna, of our world, into this silent, peaceful future. I would be the sickness. I would be the chaos. I would be the ghost that haunted their perfect, passionless garden. I would remember for them all. With that, the story is over. Let's move to the next story. The motel was a fossil, a perfectly preserved specimen from an era of chrome, linoleum, and a kind of desperate roadside optimism that no longer exists. It was called the Starlight Vista, a grand, ludicrous name for a low-slung, L-shaped building of peeling paint and buzzing neon that offered a stunning vista of a gas station and a 24-hour diner. I was the night clerk, a post I had occupied for the past 6 years. My name is Arthur, and my life had become a long, quiet, and deeply repetitive night, punctuated only by the arrival of the occasional weary traveler or the distant melancholy wail of a train passing through the dark. The Starlight Vista was a place of ghosts, but not the spooky kind. It was haunted by the ghosts of salesmen with worn-out briefcases, of families on cross-country trips in wood-paneled station wagons, of lovers meeting for clandestine, lukewarm affairs. Every scuff on the floor, every cigarette burn on the Formica countertops was a small, silent testament to a life that had passed through and moved on. I was the curator of this museum of transient lives. My nightly ritual was as fixed and unchanging as the constellations. I'd make a pot of coffee that was strong enough to dissolve a spoon. I'd read the local paper with a kind of detached anthropological interest, and I'd check the reservation ledger. The ledger was the one anomaly in my otherwise predictable world. It was a thick, leather-bound book, its pages yellowed and soft with age, a holdover from the pre-digital era that the motel's owner, a flinty, unsentimental old man named Mr. Gable, refused to replace. And in that ledger there was the mystery of Room 9. Every single night, for as long as I had worked there, the entry for Room 9 was the same. A single, neat, and unchanging line, written in a precise, slightly old-fashioned cursive, J. Corbin. No first name, no payment information, no check-in time. Just the name. The reservation was a permanent, unmovable fixture in the book. The first time I asked Mr. Gable about it, he had given me a look that was as cold and sharp as a shard of broken glass. "Room 9 is not your concern, Arthur," he'd said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "It's occupied, permanently. You do not knock on the door. You do not slide a bill under it. You simply leave it be. Is that understood?" It was not an invitation for a conversation, it was an order, and for 6 years I had obeyed it. I had treated Room 9 as if it did not exist. It was a blank spot on the map of my small nocturnal kingdom, but my curiosity, a slow, patient, and persistent creature, had been gnawing at the edges of my obedience for years. I had done the math. I had gone back, page by yellowed page, through the old ledgers that were stored in the back office. The reservation for J. Corbin had started on a Tuesday, October 14th, 1986, and it had never stopped. 39 years, 14,235 nights, a single, unbroken reservation. Who was J. Corbin? Was he a recluse, a modern-day Howard Hughes, living out his days in a cheap roadside motel? But I had never seen anyone go in or out of that room. The housekeeping staff, 2 quiet middle-aged sisters named Maria and Sophia, never cleaned it. When I had asked them, they had just crossed themselves and shaken their heads, muttering something in Spanish about bad air. The room itself was a paradox. It was at the far end of the west wing, the last door on the left. The paint on the door was not peeling. The brass number 9 was not tarnished. The "Do Not Disturb" sign, a small plastic rectangle, hung permanently from the knob. Its red letters faded to a pale anemic pink. The window that faced the parking lot was always dark, its thick mustard-yellow curtains always drawn, but the room was not dead. It consumed electricity. I had checked the meters in the maintenance closet. Room 9 drew a steady, consistent, and low-level amount of power day and night, the kind of power draw you'd see from a single, low-wattage light bulb, and maybe an old, inefficient clock radio. My quiet, ordered life was built around this one, singular and deeply unsettling mystery, and for 6 years I had been content to let it remain one. But then Mr. Gable died. A heart attack, swift and efficient in his sleep. His estranged daughter, a brisk, no-nonsense woman from the city, inherited the motel, and her first order of business was to modernize. A team of contractors descended upon the starlight vista, and the comfortable, dusty silence of my life was shattered by the sound of hammers and power saws. They were replacing the carpets, updating the wiring, and, to my horror, installing a new computerized reservation system. The leather-bound ledger, my strange anachronistic Bible, was to be retired. I knew my time was running out. The new system would not tolerate the gentle, unspoken mystery of J. Corbin. It would demand a credit card number, a check-in date, a digital footprint. The ghost in my machine was about to be exorcised by an IT professional. I had to know. I had to understand. Before the bulldozers of the 21st century paved over the one true and profound mystery of my life. The night before the new system was scheduled to go online, I made my decision. The contractors were gone. The motel was quiet, save for the hum of the ice machine and the snores of a traveling salesman in room 3. I took the master key, a heavy old-fashioned brass key that I had never in 6 years had a reason to use for room 9. My footsteps echoed in the empty parking lot as I walked towards the west wing. The air was cold and still. The buzzing of the neon sign seemed to grow louder, more insistent, as I approached the door. I stood before it for a long moment, my heart a frantic, trapped bird in my chest. The faded "Do Not Disturb" sign seemed to mock me. My hand trembled as I slid the key into the lock. It turned with a smooth, silent, and well-oiled click that was deeply, profoundly unnerving. I took a deep breath, the air tasting of asphalt and impending revelation, and I pushed the door open. The room was not what I expected. It was not a dusty, forgotten time capsule. It was not the squalid den of a recluse. It was a waiting room. The room was immaculate. The bed, a standard Motel-issue double, was made with military precision. The cheap polyester bedspread pulled taut, not a single wrinkle on its surface. The carpet, a swirling psychedelic pattern of orange and brown, was perfectly vacuumed. There was not a speck of dust on the faux wood headboard or the formica top of the small round table. But the room was not empty. On the table, next to a small bakelite lamp that was emitting a soft, warm, golden glow, was a single open book. And sitting in the room's only armchair, a worn vinyl monstrosity the color of a bruised avocado, was a man. He was old, but it was an age that was impossible to quantify. He was dressed in a simple, gray, and slightly old-fashioned suit. His face was a road map of wrinkles, but his eyes, a pale, washed-out blue, were clear, sharp, and utterly, completely ancient. He was not a ghost. He was solid. He was real. And he was looking directly at me. He did not seem surprised. He seemed patient, as if he had been waiting for me to open that door for a very, very long time. "Arthur," he said, his voice a low, soft, and impossibly tired sound. "You're early. I wasn't expecting you for another 17 years. I stared at him, my mind a screaming white noise chaos of disbelief. Who are you?" I stammered. "Are you J. Corbin?" He smiled, a faint, sad, and deeply weary smile. "In a manner of speaking, it's a professional name, a designation. You can call me Jonas." "What is this place?" I whispered, my eyes darting around the clean, sterile, and utterly soulless room. "What have you been doing in here for 39 years?" "Waiting," he said simply, "and working." He gestured to the open book on the table. I took a hesitant step into the room. The air was still and cool, and it had a strange, neutral, almost non-existent smell. It was like the air in a clean room, a place where the outside world was not allowed to enter. I looked at the book. It was a ledger, identical to the one I used at the front desk, and it was open to today's date. All the rooms were marked as vacant, except for one, Room 9, J. Corbin, and beneath it a new line had been added in the same neat and precise cursive. Arthur Penhaligon, 11:17 p.m., my name, I looked up at him, a cold, creeping dread, far worse than any simple, superstitious fear, beginning to seep into my bones. "What is this?" "I'm a clerk, Arthur," Jonas said, his ancient blue eyes holding mine. "Just like you. A manager of a very specific and very necessary kind of roadside motel." He gestured around the room. "This isn't just a room, it's a layover, a transfer station, a place between the road you were on and the one you're about to be on." I don't understand," I said, my voice trembling. "You're not supposed to," he said, his voice gentle. "Not yet. Your reservation isn't for another 17 years, but you've opened the door. You've checked in early. And the rules are very strict about early check-ins." My mind was reeling, trying to process the sheer cosmic impossibility of his words. This was not a man. This was something else. And this motel, my quiet, predictable, and boring little motel, was a part of it. "What are you?" I whispered. "I am the one who helps the lost find their way," he said. "The ones who die on the road. The ones who are untethered. A car crash on the interstate, a lonely heart attack in a room that isn't their own. A soul that has, for one reason or another, missed its exit. They get stuck in the static between the stations. This place, this room, is a beacon, a quiet, stable place in the storm. And I am the one who sits here and waits for them to find their way to the front desk." I thought of the thousands of lives that had passed through the starlight vista, the salesmen, the families, the lovers, and I thought of the others, the quiet ones, the ones who checked in and never checked out, the small, forgotten tragedies that are the lifeblood of any place that is built on the lonely, anonymous promise of the open road. "And what do you do with them?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I check them in," he said. "I give them a key, and I help them to understand that the trip they were on is over, and that a new one is about to begin." He looked at me, and his eyes were filled with a sadness that was as old and as deep as the universe itself. "My work is very important, Arthur. It requires quiet. It requires discretion. It requires a place that is constant." I understood then. The reservation, the untouched room, the low, steady hum of the electricity. It was all a part of it, an anchor, a lighthouse for the lost souls of the highway, and my mundane, boring, and quiet little life had been lived unknowingly in the shadow of this profound and terrifying cosmic machinery. "But why me?" I asked. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you opened the door," he said, his voice taking on a new, graver tone. "And because my own reservation is coming due. I have been a clerk here for a very, very long time. My own journey is about to continue, and a place like this can never be left unattended." The implication of his words hit me with the force of a physical blow. The room seemed to tilt, the walls closing in. "No," I said, shaking my head. "No, I have a life. I am a clerk at a motel." "You were a clerk at a motel," he corrected gently. "But you chose to open a door that was not meant for you. You have seen behind the curtain, Arthur, and once you have seen, you cannot unsee. You are a part of the mechanism now." He stood up, his movement slow and stiff, like a man who had been sitting in the same chair for 1,000 years. He walked over to me, and he placed a heavy, cold brass key in my hand. It was the master key for room 9. "Your training was supposed to be gradual," he said, his voice a soft, tired whisper in my ear. Over the next 17 years, you would have begun to see, to understand. But now you will have to learn on the job. He walked past me, towards the open door of the room. He did not look back. He stepped out into the dark, silent parking lot of my world, and he dissolved. He didn't vanish in a puff of smoke. He just faded. He became a part of the darkness, a part of the quiet, a part of the lonely, endless night of the open road. I was alone in the room, the clean, sterile waiting room. The book was still on the table, open to my name. The soft, golden light of the lamp was still glowing. I was the new clerk, the new manager, the new J. Corbin. I walked out of the room and pulled the door shut. It clicked with a soft, final sound. I hung the faded "Do Not Disturb" sign back on the knob. I walked back to the front desk, the heavy brass key in my pocket, a cold, heavy weight. The new computerized reservation system was installed the next day, but when the technician tried to input the data for room 9, the system crashed. They tried 3 times. Every time, the same result. The new digital world could not comprehend the old analog and cosmic truth of that room. In the end, they just left it alone, a single, anomalous, and permanent booking in a system that was otherwise perfect, a ghost in the new machine. My life is different now. It is still quiet. It is still nocturnal. I am still the clerk at a roadside motel. But I have a new set of responsibilities. I still make the coffee. I still read the paper. But now I also watch. And I listen. And sometimes, in the dead of night, a new guest will arrive. They will look confused and lost and afraid. They will not have a reservation, but I will know their name. I will check them in, and I will give them a key to a room that is not on any map, a quiet, clean, and peaceful room, a place where they can rest before they continue on their journey. I have 17 years until my own check-in, 17 years to be the quiet, patient, and necessary guardian of the lost souls of the Starlight Vista. It is a strange and lonely and sometimes terrifying job. But I have come to understand that it is also a profound and deeply and strangely sacred one. The road is long and the night is dark, and everyone eventually needs a place to rest, and I am the one who leaves the light on. That brings this story to a close. Let's carry on to the next one. Inside the abandoned mall, every store still has fresh food. I didn't go to the mall for food. I went because I had nowhere else to be. It was late October, the kind of cold that settled into your joints and whispered about winter like a threat. My apartment had flooded, burst pipe in the unit above, and the landlord predictably shrugged and said, "Give it a week." So I packed a duffel with clothes, my laptop, a half-empty bottle of ibuprofen, and drove west on Route 28, following the GPS until it glitched and spat out a single name, Willow Creek Galleria, listed as permanently closed, demolition pending. Photos online showed chain-link fencing, boarded entrances, graffiti on the glass doors, a corpse of consumerism picked clean by time and scavengers. But when I turned off the highway, the fence wasn't there, just an access road, cracked but clear, leading to a sprawling low-rise complex half swallowed by overgrown sumac and skeletal oaks. The sign above. The main entrance still stood, faded gold lettering on teal tile. But the Galleria had peeled away, leaving only Willow Creek. One Ellen Willow had fallen, leaving a jagged hole like a missus tooth. The front door slid open as I approached, not with a whir or a pneumatic sigh, those systems were long dead, but with a slow, reluctant groan like a man turning in his sleep. No alarm sounded. No motion lights flickered on. The air that rushed out wasn't stale or mildewed. It smelled like bread, fresh, yeasty, warm from the oven. I hesitated. A rational part of me said, "Turn around, drive to a motel, sleep in the car if you have to." But another part, the part that hadn't slept in 2 nights, that jumped at shadows, that woke gasping from dreams of rising water and muffled screams, that part stepped inside. The atrium stretched before me, vaulted skylights above, grimy but intact. Dust motes hung in the slanted afternoon light, drifting like plankton in a amber. Fountains stood dry, their basins filled with leaves and brittle seed pods. Escalators were frozen mid-climb, steps locked in place like fossilized vertebrae, and yet the stores were open, not looted, not gutted, not boarded. Each storefront gleamed under its own soft light, fluorescent tubes humming faintly, display windows clean, mannequins posed mid-stride in last season's fashions. A bookstore, a candle shop, a boutique selling handmade soaps, and food everywhere. The sunny side. Diner, a retro chrome and booth joint near the center court, had its open sign lit in red cursive. Steam fogged the glass. Through the window, I saw a pot of coffee bubbling on a burner behind the counter. A plate of eggs, sunny side up, sat on the pass-through, yolks glistening, toast still steaming beside them. I pushed the door open. A bell dinged. The smell hit me like a physical thing. Bacon fat, maple syrup, black coffee, butter melting on hot griddle. "Be right with you," a voice called from the kitchen. Female, warm, familiar. I looked around. No one at the counter, no customers. I walked to the pass-through. The eggs were perfect. White firm, edges lacy, yolks trembling, unbroken. A sprig of parsley, vibrant green, dewy, rested beside the toast. I touched the plate. Warm, not hot, not reheated. Fresh. "Hungry?" the voice said again. I turned. She stood in the kitchen doorway, mid-50s, apron tied over a floral blouse, hair pinned back, smiling. She looked familiar, not in the way of someone I'd met, but in the way of someone I'd known deeply long ago. A face from childhood photos I'd lost in a move, a voice from a lullaby I could almost remember. "You must be tired," she said, stepping forward. Her shoes made no sound on the tile. "Long drive?" "How did you—" She waved a hand, gentle. "Saw your car out front. Old Camry, right? Blue with the dent on the rear fender." She smiled. "You've been carrying that dent for years." My blood went cold. It was my car. And the dent, yes. From a deer on I-80 2019, I'd never told anyone the exact location, never posted it, just knew it. "Sit," she said, guiding me to a booth. "Let me fix you something proper." I sat. She moved behind the counter, poured coffee from the pot, black, steaming, and set a mug before me. No coaster, just the ceramic, warm under my palms. I sipped. It tasted like my grandmother's coffee. Dark roast, a pinch of salt to cut the bitterness, something she swore by, something no one else did. "How?" I began. "Some places remember," she said, flipping a burger on the griddle. The sizzle was loud, real, fat popped. "Especially the ones that were loved." "Loved?" "The Galleria opened in '87, she said, not looking at me. "Back when malls were cathedrals. People came here to celebrate birthdays, first jobs, first dates, prom photos, on the fountain steps. She plated the burger, lettuce crisp, tomato glistening, cheese molten. Places like this, they hold on to things, emotions, patterns, hunger. She set the plate down. Eat! I didn't want to, but my stomach growled, loud, insistent. I picked up the burger. The bun was soft, slightly sweet. The beef, medium, juices pooling on the wax paper. I took a bite. It was perfect. Better than perfect. It tasted like home, like Sunday afternoons, like safety, like before everything fell apart. I finished the burger, the fries, hand-cut, skin on, salted just right, vanished next. Then the coffee, then a slice of apple pie she brought out. Still warm, lattice crust golden, cinnamon sharp in the steam. I didn't ask questions, not then, because with every bite, the gnawing anxiety in my chest about the flood, the job hunt, the silence from my sister, the way my hands shook when I hadn't eaten in hours, eased, not gone, just quieter. Like the food wasn't just nourishing my body, it was mending something else. "You're welcome to stay," she said, wiping the counter. "Guest rooms upstairs, near the old cinema. Linens are fresh." "Upstairs?" She nodded toward the escalators. "Third floor. Closed to the public, but open tonight." I shouldn't have agreed, but the pie had left me drowsy, the coffee warm in my belly, and the thought of driving back into the dark, of facing the water-stained walls and the silence of the empty apartment. "I'll take a room," I said. She handed me a key, brass, heavy, number 313. "No card needed," she said. "Just be back by midnight." "Why midnight?" Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "That's when the harvest ends." The escalator groaned to life as I stepped on. Rusted gears grinding, steps shuddering upward. But it held. The second floor was quieter. A bookstore with soft lamplight, shelves neatly organized, a toy store with wind-up animals poised on display, a florist where roses bloomed in buckets, petals unfurling in real time, no people, just a hum of refrigerators, the scent of paper and pine and sugar. I climbed the stairs to the third floor. It had been offices once. Now a corridor stretched before me, doors evenly spaced, each with a number and a small brass plaque. Maple, hickory, aspen, willow. Mine, 340, was willow. The door opened smoothly. A small room, twin bed with a quilted coverlet, a dresser, a window overlooking the parking lot, overgrown, yes, but with cars, dozens of them, parked neatly in rows, all facing the mall entrance, all from different decades, a 63 Impala, a 78 Pinto, a late 90s minivan with a baby on board sticker, faded but intact, and my Camry, exactly where I'd left it. I lay on the bed, didn't undress, didn't turn off the lamp on the nightstand. I watched the ceiling, listened. The mall was silent. No AC, no distant voices, just the occasional tick of cooling pipes. At 11:47 I heard it, a thump from the hallway, then another thump, thump, like something heavy being set down, then wheels, a cart, rolling, stopping outside my door. I sat up, held my breath. The doorknob turned, slowly. The door opened 6 inches. A hand appeared, pale, age-spotted, knuckles swollen with arthritis. It held a white paper bag. Steam curled from the top. The hand extended the bag into the room. Didn't speak, didn't enter, just waited. I stood, approached, took the bag, warm. The hand withdrew. The door closed. I opened the bag. Inside, a grilled cheese sandwich, crusts cut off, butter crisp and golden, and a small carton of tomato soup, still hot. My childhood comfort food, the exact way my mother made it when I was sick. Except my mother had died when I was 12, and she never cut the crusts. I set the bag on the dresser, didn't eat, went to the window, looked down. The parking lot was empty. All the cars were gone, except mine. And now, parked directly in front of the main entrance, a 1972 International Harvester Lodestar refrigerated truck. White, with faded green lettering on the side, Willow Creek Delivery, fresh daily, no returns. The rear door stood open. Inside, darkness, and stacked floor-to-ceiling cardboard boxes, each stamped with a red wax seal, not a logo, a symbol, a circle. Inside it, a single eye, lidded, watching. Beneath it, in small print, Harvest Batch. 11:47, expires, midnight. My phone buzzed, no signal, but a text appeared. You have 12 minutes. Eat the meal, return the tray, or join the inventory. I looked at the sandwich, at the soup. My stomach twisted, not with hunger now, with dread. I opened the door. The hallway was empty, but the cart remained. Stainless steel, old-fashioned, with a pull-out tray at chest height. On it, my empty coffee mug from the diner, my pie plate, my burger wrapper, folded neatly, and the grilled cheese, waiting. I picked up the tray, walked downstairs. The mall was different now, darker. The store lights were still on, but the glow was dimmer, yellowed, like old film. The Sunnyside diner was closed. Open sign flipped to closed. But the kitchen light burned. I pushed the door. The bell didn't ding. She stood at the grill, not cooking, washing dishes, her back to me. Steam rose from the sink. I brought a tray, I said. She didn't turn. Set it on the counter. I did. She rinsed a mug, set it in the drainer. You didn't eat the sandwich? She said. No. Why not? It's not real. She turned. Her face was the same, but her eyes, no whites, no pupils, just deep, glossy black, like wet obsidian. You think real means alive? She asked softly. Honey, the freshest things are always the ones that just stopped breathing. She gestured to the display case. It held desserts, cheesecake, chocolate torte, fruit tarts, all perfect, all glistening, all labeled with small handwritten cards. I leaned closer. The cards didn't say flavor. They said names. Evelyn, 47, pancreatic. Marcus, 19, carotid. Darla, 33, aneurysm. Thomas, 68, cardiac. And one, smaller, newer ink. Ben, 31. My name, my age, a question mark. The food isn't made here, she said, drying her hands. It's curated, preserved. The mall. It doesn't waste. It honors. What happens at midnight? The truck leaves, she said, takes the day's harvest back to the source. And if I'm not harvested, she smiled, then you become part of the staff. She nodded toward the kitchen. I followed her gaze. A man stood at the fryer, wearing a grease-stained apron, his face slack, pale, lips slightly parted, his eyes empty, black. He held a basket of fries, didn't move, didn't blink, just stood, waiting for an order that would never come. That's Carl, she said. He missed curfew in '09. Now he keeps the oil hot forever. The clock above the pass-through ticked. 11:58. I have to go, I said. You can't. Watch me. I turned for the door. She didn't stop me, just said, the doors only open in after 11:55. I ran, past the bookstore, the toy store, the florist, where the roses had wilted in seconds, petals blackening, crumbling to dust as I passed. The main entrance doors. I hit them, pushed, nothing, pulled, rattled the handles, locked, not mechanically, intentionally. I pounded on the glass. Outside, the truck's engine turned over, a deep diesel roar. Headlights flared, blinding white, sweeping across the atrium floor. The refrigerated doors slammed shut. Clang! The truck began to roll forward, not toward the exit, toward the mall. It drove through the glass doors, not shattering them. Passing through, like the glass was mist, it entered the atrium, stopped, idling. Exhaust fumes, sweet, cloying, filled the air. The rear doors opened, darkness yawned, and from within it began. Boxes slid out, not dropped. Placed, one by hands, pale, bone-thin, emerging from the black, setting the boxes in a neat grid on the tile. Each box bore a name, a date, a cause. The hands retreated. The door stayed open. A voice came from inside the truck, not amplified, not mechanical. A chorus, whispering, hundreds of voices, overlapping, gentle, insistent. Ben, you're hungry. You're so tired. Just come inside. The food is warm. The bed is made. No more running. No more fear. Join the harvest. The woman from the diner stood beside me now, her hand on my arm. Cold, dry, like old paper. You don't have to. Go in the truck, she said. You can stay, work, serve. Remember, we keep the good parts, the love, the laughter, the taste of your mother's pie. Tears burned my eyes because I wanted to say yes. God, I wanted to stop being afraid, to stop being alone, to have hot food and a clean bed and someone who knew me. But then I looked at Carl in the diner window, standing, always standing, oil bubbling, forever. The clock struck midnight, a single deep bong, from a place that shouldn't have a bell. The truck's headlights pulsed. The whispering rose to a hum. The woman's grip tightened. Choose, she said. I looked down at my hand, clutched in my fist, the brass key. 3 wiring, still warm. I threw it, not at her. At the skylight above the fountain, it arced. A flash of gold shattered the grimy glass. Cold night air rushed in. Rain followed, hard, sudden. The whispering faltered. The headlights dimmed. The woman hissed, "Ow," sound like steam escaping a pipe, and pulled back. I ran, not toward the doors, toward the fire exit beside the bookstore, pushed the bar. It gave. Cold rain hit my face. I stumbled into the overgrown lot. My Camry was there, engine running, doors unlocked. I threw myself inside, slammed the door, drove, didn't look back, didn't stop until sunrise. I told myself it was over, but that was 3 weeks ago, and last night I opened my fridge, empty, except for a white paper bag on the middle shelf, steam rising. Inside, the grilled cheese, crusts cut off, and beneath it, a small card, handwritten. Ben, 31, final batch. The ink was still wet. Outside, the rain started again, and far off, so faint I might have imagined it, the low diesel growl of an engine. Turning onto my street, that's where this story ends. Let's continue with the next. My GPS keeps directing me to the same abandoned house. The voice in my car is a woman named Cal. I don't know if that's her real name or even if she's a real woman. She speaks with the placid, uninflected calm of someone who has never been late, never been lost, and never felt the cold, creeping dread of being somewhere you are not supposed to be. Cal is the default voice of the Wayfinder 5000, a slightly outdated but relentlessly reliable GPS unit, suction-cupped to my windshield. For the past 6 years, as a regional sales manager for a mid-level pharmaceutical company, Cal has been my co-pilot, my navigator, my silent synthetic companion on the lonely asphalt veins of the American Midwest. She has never been wrong until she started trying to kill me, or if not kill me, then something far, far worse. The first time it happened, I was on my way to a meeting in rural Wisconsin. I was cutting through a stretch of farmland so flat and featureless, it felt like a screensaver. My appointment was in a town called Prairie Ridge, a place that barely registered as a smudge on the map. According to Cal, I was 40 minutes away. "In 200 feet, turn left," she said, her voice as serene as a mountain lake. I glanced at the screen. The purple line of my route took a sharp 90-degree turn off the main highway and onto a thin gray line that the map didn't even bother to name. "Recalculating," I said aloud, a habit I'd picked up over thousands of miles of solo driving. I tapped the screen, looking for an alternate route. There was none. This was it. I slowed the car and made the turn. The road was gravel, loose and chattering under my tires. Overgrown cornfields pressed in on both sides, their dry stalks rustling with a sound like whispering snakes. After about a mile, the road degraded further, becoming little more than 2 dirt tracks with a spine of weeds growing down the middle. My sensible company-issued sedan was not built for this. "Are you sure about this, Cal?" I muttered. "In 1,000 feet, your destination will be on the right," she replied, oblivious to my concern. The cornfields fell away, and the trees began, ancient skeletal oaks that formed a dark, claustrophobic canopy over the road. And then I saw it. Set back from the road, half swallowed by a sea of thorny, overgrown bushes, was a house. It was an old farmhouse, the kind that might have been charming a century ago. Now it was a study in decay. The white paint had peeled away in long, leprous strips, revealing the gray, weathered wood beneath. The windows were dark, hollow eyes, most of them boarded up with mismatched planks. A single skeletal tree stood in the front yard, its dead branches reaching for the sky like the fingers of a drowning man. The place didn't just feel abandoned, it felt condemned, cursed. A deep, instinctual wrongness emanated from it, a silence that was heavier and more profound than the surrounding woods. "You have arrived at your destination," Cal announced cheerfully. I stopped the car, the engine a loud, intrusive rumble in the oppressive quiet. This was not Prairie Ridge. This was the middle of nowhere. A mapping error, a glitch in the satellite. I felt a surge of annoyance, mixed with a strange, inexplicable prickle of fear. I didn't get out of the car. I didn't want to breathe the air here. I just wanted to leave. I put the car in reverse and began the slow, careful process of backing down the narrow, rutted track. My eyes kept darting to the house in my rearview mirror. I could have sworn I saw a flicker of movement in one of the dark upstairs windows, like a curtain being drawn aside. But there were no curtains. There was only splintered wood and darkness. By the time I got back to the highway and re-entered Prairie Ridge as my destination, I was an hour late for my meeting. I managed to salvage the sale with a flurry of apologies and a steep discount. I blamed the GPS, laughing it off as a piece of junk technology. But the image of that house was burned into my mind. The dead tree, the boarded-up windows, the feeling of being watched by something old and malevolent. 2 weeks later, I was in eastern Ohio, on my way to a conference, A different state, a different highway, hundreds of miles away. I was making good time, listening to a podcast, my mind on the quarterly report I had to file. In 1/4 mile, take the exit on your right, Cal said. I glanced at the screen. The exit was for a state route that seemed to veer off into a large, green, unpopulated area on the map. My route should have kept me on the interstate for another 50 miles. No, Cal, I said, sighing. We're staying on the highway. I drove past the exit. Cal was silent for a moment. Then, recalculating. In 200 feet, turn left. She was trying to take me onto a small local road, a road that, according to the map, led nowhere. A cold, familiar dread began to bloom in my stomach. Recalculate to avoid back roads, I said, my voice sharp. Route recalculated, she replied. In 1,000 feet, perform a U-turn where possible. For the next 10 minutes, we were locked in a battle of wills. Every route she suggested was a circuitous, nonsensical path that tried to steer me off the main road and into the rural unknown. She was like a horse that refused to be led, stubbornly trying to bolt for some unseen, familiar stable. Finally, in a fit of frustration, I unplugged the Wayfinder 5000 and threw it onto the passenger seat. I used my phone's mapping app for the rest of the trip. As I lay in my sterile, anonymous hotel room that night, I couldn't sleep. I picked up the Wayfinder and plugged it back in. The screen flickered to life. The map showed my current location, a little blue dot in the heart of the city. I opened the recent destinations list. At the very top of the list, it read, Crows End Road. I'd never heard the name before. I typed it into my phone's search engine. There were a few scattered results, none of them in Ohio, but one of them, a hit from a county plat map website, was in Wisconsin. It was an unmaintained dead-end road. My blood ran cold. It was the road to the abandoned house. The GPS hadn't just made a mistake. It had saved the location. It wanted to go back. The incidents grew more frequent and more insidious. Cal would be silent for hours, lulling me into a false sense of security. And then, at a crucial intersection, she would give a last-second incorrect instruction, trying to divert me. It became a constant low-level war. I began to hate the sound of her calm, pleasant voice. It was the voice of a saboteur, a traitor, in my own car. I bought a new GPS, a top-of-the-line model from a different brand. I boxed up the Wayfinder 5000 and put it in the trunk. I felt a sense of liberation as I programmed my first trip into the new device. The new voice was a man with a crisp British accent. It was a refreshing change. I was driving through Indiana on my way to see a client in Fort Wayne. The new GPS was working perfectly. In 1 mile, you will reach your destination, the British voice announced, and then a burst of static from the car's speakers. The new GPS screen flickered and went blank. A moment later, it came back on. But the map was different. It was a local, rural map. The British voice was gone. In 200 feet, turn left, said the calm, familiar, horrifying voice of Cal. I stared at the screen in disbelief. It was Cal's interface, her purple line, her familiar fonts. She had somehow overridden the new device. She had infected it. My car, my sanctuary, the one place where I was supposed to be in control, had been completely and utterly compromised. I pulled over to the side of the road, my hands shaking. This was not a glitch. This was not a technological error. This was something else. This was an intelligence, a malevolent, focused intelligence that was fixated on one thing, getting me back to that house. That was when my life began to unravel. The fight was no longer just about directions. It was about my sanity. I became obsessed. I spent my nights in hotel rooms, not preparing for meetings, but scouring the internet, digging into the history of that small, forgotten plot of land in rural Wisconsin. The property on Crow's End Road, I discovered, had belonged to a family named the Whitakers. The last record of them was from a census of 1978. A husband, Silas, a wife, Mary, and a 6-year-old daughter named Lily. Then, in the fall of that same year, there was a fire. The official report, which I found in a digitized archive of the local newspaper, was brief and tragic. The fire had consumed the house. The cause was listed as undetermined. The bodies of Silas and Mary were found in the ashes. The daughter, Lily, was never found. She was presumed to have perished in the blaze, her small body consumed by the inferno. The article ended with a haunting single line from the fire chief at the time. "It's a terrible tragedy. That house is at the end of a long, dark road. By the time we got the call and found our way out there, it was too late. There was nothing we could do." I stared at the grainy black and white photo that accompanied the article. It was the house, my house, but it was before the decay had set in, before the boards were on the windows. It was just an ordinary, slightly ramshackle farmhouse, and on the porch, so small and out of focus that she was almost a ghost, was a little girl in a white dress holding a doll, Lily. The knowledge didn't bring me peace. It brought a deeper, colder dread. The house wasn't just an abandoned building. It was a tomb, a place of profound, unresolved tragedy. And for some reason, its ghost had latched onto my GPS. The haunting escalated. Cal began to speak to me even when the GPS was turned off. I'd be driving in silence, and her voice would suddenly emanate from the car's speakers, soft and clear. "Are you lost, Alan?" she'd ask. My name is Alan. I had never programmed my name into the device. The first time it happened, I almost drove off the road. I tore the GPS from the windshield, unplugged it, and threw it in the trunk, burying it under a suitcase. But her voice still came through the speakers. She was in the car's Bluetooth system, in its very wiring. She began to use details from my life. "Sarah is wondering when you will be home," she said one night as I was driving through a rainstorm. Sarah was my wife. "Emily has a piano recital on Friday. You shouldn't miss it." Emily was my 7-year-old daughter. The voice was using my own life, my love for my family, as a weapon against me, a way to anchor my fear, to make it more real. My work suffered. I missed meetings. I lost clients. I was constantly exhausted, living on a knife's edge of paranoia and fear. My boss put me on probation. I tried to explain, but how do you tell your boss that your car is haunted by a ghost who is obsessed with a tragic fire from the 1970s? My home life, my sanctuary, began to crumble. Sarah knew something was wrong. I was distant, jumpy, prone to long, silent stares out the window. I had lost weight. I had dark, bruised-looking circles under my eyes. "Alan, what is it?" she asked one night, her voice full of a worry that was beginning to curdle into frustration. "You're like a ghost. You're here, but you're not. Are you having an affair?" The question was so mundane, so normal, it was almost a relief. "No," I said, the word coming out as a choked, hollow sound. "God, no, it's the driving. I'm just burned out." It was a weak, pathetic lie, and we both knew it. The distance between us grew. A cold, silent canyon, carved out by a secret I couldn't share. How could I tell her that I was terrified to get in my car? That I had started taking rental cars to my meetings, only to have Cal's voice eventually bleed through their speakers, too. She was not tied to the device. She was tied to me. The dream started. I would be in the house. It was no longer abandoned, but filled with a thick, acrid smoke that stung my eyes and choked my lungs. I could hear a child crying, a thin, terrified wail that seemed to come from the walls themselves. I would try to find her, stumbling through the smoke-filled rooms, my hands outstretched, but the layout of the house would shift and change, a maddening architectural nightmare. I would always wake up just as I reached the door to the nursery, my hand on the hot brass knob, the sound of the girls weeping on the other side. I knew I was approaching a breaking point. I was losing my job, my wife, my mind. I was a man being haunted into oblivion. I had two choices. I could let it destroy me, or I could confront it. I had to go back to the house. I had to go to Crow's End Road, not as a lost, accidental tourist, but as a man looking for an answer. I had to understand why this was happening to me, why I had been chosen. I told Sarah I was going on a weekend sales retreat. Another lie to add to the growing pile. I got in my car. This time, I didn't fight it. I plugged in the Wayfinder 5000. Its screen cracked from one of my more violent attempts to silence it. "Navigate to last destination," I said, my voice a resigned, trembling whisper. "Navigating to Crow's End Road," Cal replied, her voice sounding for the very first time something like satisfied. The drive was 5 hours. Cal was silent the entire way, a quiet, expectant presence. As I turned off the highway and onto the familiar gravel road, a thick, unnatural fog rolled in, blanketing the cornfields in a shroud of gray. The world grew silent, my car the only moving thing in a dead, quiet landscape. When I arrived, the house looked different. The decay was the same, but the wrongness I had felt before was now a palpable, physical presence. It was a low, humming vibration in the air, a pressure against my eardrums. It was the feeling of a place that was awake and waiting. I got out of the car. The air was cold and smelled of damp earth and something else. Smoke. A faint, phantom smell of old, cold smoke. I walked up the rotten, sagging steps of the porch. The front door was ajar, hanging from a single rusted hinge. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The interior was a wreck. Dust as thick and soft as gray snow covered everything. The furniture was draped in cobwebs that looked like funeral shrouds. In the center of the living room, there was a large, dark stain on the floorboards where the fire had burned hottest. My eyes were drawn to the staircase. It led up into a darkness that felt solid, absolute. The child's weeping from my dreams echoed in my memory. "Why am I here?" I shouted, my voice swallowed by the oppressive silence. "Are you lost, Alan?" The voice wasn't Cal's. It was in my head. A man's voice, rough and low like stones grinding together. I spun around. The room was empty. "You're not supposed to be here," the voice whispered in my mind. "This is my house. She is my daughter." A cold, creeping terror, far worse than anything I had felt before, began to seep into my bones. This was not the ghost of a lost little girl. This was something else. This was Silas, the father. I stumbled back, my hand finding the wall to steady myself. My fingers brushed against a patch of peeling wallpaper. Underneath it was a dark, almost black wood. The house had been charred from the inside out. The fire had been far worse than the newspaper had reported. I forced myself to move, to explore. I was an archaeologist in a tomb of sorrow. I found a kitchen, a rusted-out stove, a table with a single overturned chair. I found the master bedroom, a mattress with its springs bursting out like broken ribs. And then I found the nursery. The door was closed. The brass knob was cool to the touch. I took a deep breath and pushed it open. The room was almost completely burned out. The walls were black with soot. The crib was a skeletal, charred frame. The air was thick with the smell of tragedy. But in the corner of the room, something had survived. It was a small wooden toy chest. The paint had been blistered by the heat, but it was largely intact. I knelt down and opened it. Inside, nestled among a few melted plastic toys, was a single leather-bound diary, its pages yellowed and warped by the heat and the damp. The name Mary Whitaker was embossed on the cover. I opened it, my hands trembling. Mary's handwriting was a neat, elegant script, but as the entries progressed, they became a frantic, terrified scrawl. She wrote of her husband, Silas, of a good man who had been consumed by a darkness, a possessive, jealous rage. She wrote of his obsession with his daughter, Lily, an obsession that had soured into something unnatural, something terrifying. He wouldn't let her go to school. He wouldn't let her have friends. He saw every stranger as a threat. The final entry was dated the night of the fire. He has locked us in. He says the world is too full of poison, that he is the only one who can keep Lily pure. He has been talking to himself all day. I can smell gasoline. He is not going to let us leave. He is going to keep us here with him forever. If anyone ever finds this, know that I tried to save my daughter. Know that I loved her. A single hot tear dripped onto the fragile page. It wasn't a tragic accident. It was a murder-suicide. Silas had been a monster. He had trapped his family, and when he couldn't control them in life, he had bound them to this place in death. But that didn't explain me. It didn't explain the GPS. I heard a floorboard creak behind me. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. Nothing but the feeling of being watched, of Silas's malevolent presence, was suffocating. I had to get out. I stumbled out of the nursery, clutching the diary, and ran for the stairs. As I reached the bottom step, I saw it. On a small, dusty table by the front door, half hidden under a pile of rotted mail, was an object that had no business being there. It was a Wayfinder 5000 GPS unit, the exact same model as mine. Its screen was cracked, and it was caked in dust and grime. But it was unmistakable, and then the final, horrifying piece of the puzzle clicked into place. My GPS wasn't haunted by a ghost from the house. My GPS was from the house. Silas Whitaker, a traveling salesman, perhaps, like me. A man who relied on a piece of technology to guide him. A man who had programmed his home address into the device. A single, final destination. On that last, terrible night, as he drove home with his can of gasoline and his murderous intent, that GPS had been in his car, charting his final fatal course. The device had absorbed the trauma, the rage, the violent possessive energy of that night. It had become a vessel for his will. It was a cursed object, a relic of a murder. And somehow, Through the strange, convoluted currents of second-hand sales and forgotten electronics, it had found its way to me. Or, more terrifyingly, it had chosen me. A man just like him, a traveling father with a wife and a daughter at home. It was trying to repeat the pattern. It was trying to bring me home, to its home, to make me a part of its endless, tragic loop. "You can stay," the voice of Silas whispered in my head. "We can be a family." I heard the front door slam shut with a deafening final boom. The air grew cold. The shadows in the room deepened and seemed to coalesce. A figure began to form in the doorway, a tall, gaunt man made of smoke and rage and decades of festering hate. But another presence was in the room now, too, a small, cold spot by the foot of the stairs. I could hear a faint, sobbing sound. It was her, Lily. She wasn't a part of his rage. She was his victim, his prisoner. And she was just as trapped as he was. I knew then what I had to do. I couldn't fight him. He was too strong here. This was his house. But maybe I could free her. The GPS. It was a beacon for him, but maybe it could be a key for her. It was a map. It knew the way home, but it was stuck on its final terrible instruction. I had to give it a new one. I ran back to my car, the ghost of Silas shrieking with rage behind me, the force of his anger a physical battering wind. I fumbled for my keys, my hands slick with sweat. I got in the car and slammed the door, locking it. The windows began to frost over from the inside. A child's small spectral handprint appeared on the passenger side glass. I ripped my own wayfinder from the dashboard. I looked at the little girl's handprint. "It's okay," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I'm going to take you home. Not this home, a different one." My fingers flew across the screen of the GPS. I went into the settings, into the saved addresses. Under Home, it listed the coordinates for Crow's End Road. I deleted it. Then I typed in a new address. My address. The address where my wife and daughter were waiting. The address that, for the past few months, I had been too terrified to even think about. "Set destination to home," I said, my voice firm. The screen flickered. The ghost of Silas roared, and the car shook violently, as if in the grip of a giant, unseen hand. For a moment, the map showed the twisted, impossible route back to the farmhouse. But then something shifted. A new, clean, purple line appeared on the screen, leading away from this place of horror, leading back towards the highway, back towards the world of the living. "Navigating to home," Cal said. Her voice was different. The cold, synthetic edge was gone. It was just a voice now, a tool. The curse had been broken. The pressure on the car vanished. The frost on the windows melted away. The small, spectral handprint faded. I looked in my rearview mirror. The house on Crow's End Road was just a house again, a sad, rotting structure in a dying wood. The profound, malevolent wrongness was gone. I had not defeated the ghost of Silas Whitaker. I had simply taken away his map. I had stolen his ride. I drove away from that place and didn't look back. The 5-hour drive home was the quietest, most peaceful drive of my life. I threw the Wayfinder 5000 into a gas station trash can 100 miles away. When I walked through my front door, the smell of Sarah's cooking, the sound of Emily practicing a clumsy, beautiful song on the piano, it was the most sacred, wonderful sensory experience of my life. I held them both, my face buried in their hair, and I wept. They didn't understand why, not really, and I would never be able to tell them. I quit my job. I found a new one, a local one. I don't drive much anymore. My world has become smaller and infinitely more precious. I am a man who has looked into the abyss, a place where love becomes a cage and home becomes a tomb. I am a man who was chosen by a ghost to be his replacement. But I refused the role. I rewrote the map. I chose my own destination, and every morning, when I wake up in my own bed next to my wife, with the sound of my daughter padding down the hall, I know, with a gratitude that is as deep and as real as a prayer, that I have arrived. I am home. With that, the story is over. Let's move to the next story. The mall that shut down. Years ago, still announces sales at midnight. We didn't go to Holloway Galleria for ghosts. We went for footage. Cass needed B-roll for her documentary, Retail Ruin, The Death of the American Mall. And Holloway was the crown jewel of decay, a 1.2 million square foot monument to 1980s success, shuttered overnight in 2007 when its anchor tenant, a regional department store chain, imploded in a fraud scandal. No fire, no collapse, just a silent corporate vanishing act. Doors locked, lights extinguished, security guards dismissed via email, and left to rot. Marble floors cracked by frost heaves, skylights shattered by hail, kiosks swallowed by creeping ivy that snaked in through broken vents. It was supposed to be empty, just dust, pigeons, and the slow, dignified collapse of drywall. But the rumors wouldn't die, not the usual ones. No vanishing teenagers, no spectral janitors, just this. Every night at midnight, the PA system crackles to life. A Taz, woman's voice, calm, polished, retail perfect, announces a sale, always the same sale, always the same department, always ending with the same phrase. Remember, loyalty is rewarded. Cass scoffed. Probably a backup battery feeding a looped tape, or a prankster with a Bluetooth speaker. Theo, ever the skeptic with the spectrum analyzer, nodded. If it's real, I'll catch the carrier wave. If not, we get great decay shots. And me? I just needed to see it. Because 10 years ago, exactly 10 years ago, my sister Mara vanished from Holloway Galleria. Not abducted, not lost. Announced. Her name? Mara Reed. Flashed on the directory board beside Security Office, Lost Child. For 3 days after she disappeared. Then it vanished, like she'd never existed. The police report listed her as voluntary departure. No evidence, no witnesses, just a pink raincoat left draped over a bench outside Spencer's Gifts, pockets empty, except for a single dried juniper berry. I never believed she left. I believed the mall took her. So on the 10th anniversary, November 13th, 2025, we went back. Midnight. The chain-link fence surrounding Holloway was rusted through in places, sagging like a tired spine. We slipped through a gap near the old food court entrance, boots crunching on broken glass and frozen mulch. The air inside wasn't stale, it was preserved. The smell hit me first, lemon-scented floor wax, cinnamon pretzels, and beneath it, the dry, papery scent of old paperbacks from the long-gone Walden books. Not decay, not mildew, memory. As if the building had sealed itself in amber the moment the last shopper left. Our headlamps cut narrow cones through the dark. The atrium loomed ahead. 3 stories of dead escalators, a skeletal fountain crusted with white mineral deposits, a giant, moth-eaten banner still strung across the balcony. Holloway Galleria, where friendship begins. We moved deeper. Stores gaped like eye sockets. Radio shack. Shelves bare, cords trailing from empty display cases like severed veins. The Gap. Mannequins still posed, one arm raised, fingers curled as if holding an invisible shirt. Spencer's Gifts. Blacklight posters peeled at the corners, a single rubber skull grinning from the counter. Cass filmed. Theo scanned frequencies. I walked ahead. Drawn. To the center. To the old customer service kiosk. A curved island of faux wood laminate. Nameplate still legible. How may I help you? Behind it, mounted on the wall, the PA console, brushed steel, buttons labeled all call, security, directory, sales, dusty, dead. Theo checked his analyzer. 0 EMF, no power on the grid. This place is cold. Cass checked her watch. 11:58 p.m. 2 minutes. If it's a hoax, it'll start soon. We waited. Silence. Not peaceful. Thick. Like cotton packed in the ears. 11:59. And the draft moved. Through the atrium. Not from outside. From the ventilation shafts. Smelling of ozone and burnt sugar. Theo's analyzer flickered. A spike. Low frequency. 0.7 hertz infrasound. The range that vibrates the human eyeball. Makes you see shadows. Feel watched. Feel hungry. Midnight. The PA system crackled, not static. A clearing of the throat. Wet. Professional. Familiar. Then, the voice. Female. Mid-50s. Warm. Smiling. The voice of a woman who'd spent 30 years saying, "Have a nice day." With absolute sincerity. Good evening, shoppers. Holloway Galleria is pleased to announce a special Midnight Madness sale. Tonight only. In the children's department, room 214, everything is 50% off. Dresses, shoes, raincoats, hairbrushes, juniper berry necklaces, all must go. Remember, loyalty is rewarded. The voice cut off. Silence rushed back, denser now, heavier. Cass lowered her camera. Okay, that was not a tape. Theo stared at his screen. The carrier wave, it's not radio, it's acoustic, resonating through the building structure, like the whole mall is humming. I didn't move, because beneath the voice I'd heard it, a whisper, layered beneath the polished tone, Mara's voice, faint, terrified. Eli, don't come. The sale isn't real. The discount is a lie. They're not selling things. They're selling names. I walked toward the escalators. The up escalator to the second floor, frozen mid-motion, rusted steps like broken teeth. I stepped on. The others followed. The children's department. Room 214, not a store, a suite. 2 connected spaces, once a toy store and a children's boutique, merged behind a false wall, no signage, just a door. Plain white, with a single word stenciled in black. Loyalty. The handle turned. Inside, light. Not battery-powered, not generator-fed. Ambient. A soft, greenish glow rising from the floor. The room was set up like a boutique. Racks of tiny dresses, pink, yellow, blue, on miniature mannequins, rows of shoes neatly paired. A display table of hairbrushes, bristles tangled with strands of hair, blonde, red, black, brown. And in the center, a rack of raincoats, pink, all identical, all labeled. Mara Reed, size 6, final sale. I reached for one. The fabric wasn't nylon. Skin, preserved, stretched, stitched at the seams with black thread. The hood lined with soft russet fur, not rabbit. Hair. Mara's hair. I knew the shade, the texture, the way it caught the light. Cass gasped, pointed at the far wall, a full-length mirror, fogged, words written in condensation. Your discount is waiting, Elias. 50% off your name. Pay in memories. Collect your purchase in the back room. Theo backed toward the door. Eli, look. He pointed at the floor. The green light wasn't ambient. It pulsed from beneath the tile. Between the cracks, thin lines of phosphorescent green forming a pattern, not random, a floor plan. Holloway Galleria, but altered. The food court, gone. The atrium collapsed. And in its place, a new structure. Deep underground, labeled in glowing script, the Loyalty Center. Department of Rewards. Room B7, below it, words. All sales final, no returns, no refunds. Loyalty is rewarded. The PA crackled again, not the announcer, a child's voice, clear, singing. Back and forth, hand in hand, across the dark, across the land. Mara's song, from the basement, the thump, 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 began, not from the walls, from the floor, like a heart or a fist, knocking. The raincoats on the rack twitched, not wind, breathing. Cass grabbed my arm. Eli, we need to go. Now. I didn't move, because the mirror fogged again. New words. You swore an oath. Pinky swear. If one of us falls, the other jumps too. You jumped, Elias, but you didn't land. You were caught. I remembered, not the fall, the promise. Mara and I, 7 and 9, playing near the fountain. She leaned too far, slipped, fell into the shallow water. I jumped in after her, laughing, splashing, but the water wasn't shallow. It deepened. The fountain wasn't stone, it was a mouth. And as we sank, green light flaring around us, a voice whispered, Loyalty is rewarded. We didn't drown. We were hired. Mara, junior loyalty associate. Me, security trainee. Our first task, bring back the others, the ones who broke their oaths, the ones who forgot. The PA crackled one last time, the announcer's voice softer now, sad. Final call for Elias Reed. Your discount expires in 5 minutes. Proceed to the Loyalty Center, room B7. Your sister is waiting. She's been very patient. A pause. Then Mara's whisper, raw with tears. Please, Eli, say you're loyal. Say it, or they'll mark you. Absent. The raincoats began to unzip, not mechanically, biologically. Zippers sliding down spines, hoods peeling back, revealing faces, not mannequins. Children, dozens of them, eyes closed, mouths sewn shut with black thread, hands folded over the chests, all wearing pink raincoats, all with russet hair, all Mara. The mirror fogged. Final words. Absent students, go to the office. Absent customers, go to the basement. Absent brothers, get replaced. The door behind us slammed shut. The bolt slid home. The green light flared, and from the floor the thump, thump, thump became a roar. The tile cracked, not breaking, opening. A staircase descended, not concrete, bone. Vertebrae fused into steps, glowing green. At the bottom, light, and the smell, apples, rotting, and river mud. Lena's voice, no, Mara's voice, rose from the dark, clear, calm. Come on, Elias, it's time for your reward. I looked at Cass, at Theo. Their eyes weren't theirs anymore, black like river stones. They walked to the staircase, descended without hesitation. I followed, not because I wanted to, because the oath pulled, because the mall remembered, because loyalty, once sworn, is forever. The stairs ended in a circular chamber, the Loyalty Center, walls lined with lockers, each labeled with a name. Cassandra Voss, reward, eternal customer. Theodore Kim, reward, perpetual technician. Elena Mara Reed, reward, junior loyalty associate. And one, empty. Elias Reed, reward, pending. In the center, a desk, laminate, nameplate. How may I help you? Behind it, a woman, mid-50s, warm smile, eyes full of green gold light. She wore a pink raincoat, held a hairbrush, bristles tangled with russet hair. "Welcome back, Elias," she said, Mara's voice, but older, smoother, layered with the announcer's polish. "You're just in time for the final sale." She slid a form across the desk, not paper, skin, stretched, stitched at the edges. At the top, loyalty oath, final acceptance. Below, blank lines. Name. Discount claimed. Payment. Signature. A pen lay beside it, bone, femur, tip sharpened to a point, dipped in black ink, not ink, dried blood. Mara, the woman, smiled. "Just sign, Elias. Say you're loyal. Say you remember the promise. Say you'll stay. And your reward is her." She gestured to the left. A curtain parted, a swing, bone, chains thick as wrists, 2 seats, one small, one tall. Mara sat in the small one, 7 years old, freckles, russet hair, alive, smiling. "Come on. Daddy," she whispered, "the swing needs 3. I picked up the pen. The bone was warm, alive. I looked at the form, the blank lines, and I understood. The discount wasn't 50% off, it was 50% of your name. Pay in memories, collect your sister, but the price was to stay, to become part of the staff, to man the PA, to greet the next lost child, to whisper, 'Loyalty is rewarded,' into the static. The pen touched the skin form, the ink spread, not black, green, glowing, and as I wrote, Elias Reed. The letters didn't sit on the surface. They sank in like roots, like chains, like a promise finally kept. Mara on the swing smiled. The chains began to hum. The green light filled the chamber, and from the PA above, my voice now calm, polished, retail perfect, announced, "Good evening, shoppers. Holloway Galleria is pleased to announce a special Midnight Madness sale. Tonight only. In the security office, room B7. Everything is 50% off. Brothers, sisters, memories, oaths. All must go. Remember, loyalty is rewarded." The mall doesn't close. It hires. It gathers the lost, the broken-hearted, the ones who swore on pinky promises, on raincoats, on swings that they'd never let go. And when they return, the sale is always waiting. The discount is always ready. And the reward? The reward is her, smiling on the swing, waiting for you to finally sign, because the most terrifying thing about Holloway Galleria isn't the midnight announcements. It's the moment you realize you're the next voice on the PA. And the sale never ends. It just cycles. For the next customer, the next brother, the next oath, waiting to be claimed in the green-lit dark, where loyalty is always rewarded and all sales are final. And this story ends here. The next one begins now. The night the staff vanished, mid-shift, leaving every key card in place. I took the job at the Aurora Grand because I was out of options. After the layoff at the data center, a strategic optimization, they called it, I'd burned through my severance paying off Dad's medical debt. The apartment complex gave me 3 days to vacate after I missed rent twice. When the Craigslist ad popped up, night auditor urgent, 18 HRI plus room, no background check. I didn't question why a luxury hotel in downtown Seattle would hire someone with no hospitality experience. I just showed up at 10 p.m. on a rain-lashed Tuesday, my backpack smelling of stale coffee and desperation. The Aurora Grand wasn't grand anymore. Once a 1920s jewel with gilded ceilings and crystal chandeliers, it now huddled between skyscrapers like a forgotten relic. Its marble lobby was scratched and dull, the gold leaf peeling like sunburnt skin. The night manager who interviewed me, Martha, according to her tarnished name tag, moved like a ghost herself. Pale, trembling hands. She never made eye contact. "Shift's 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., she rasped, leading me past empty concierge desks and velvet ropes coated in dust. "Front desk only, no housekeeping, no room service, just answer phones, log deliveries, reset the thermostats in vacant rooms, and never touch the staff key cards." "Staff key cards?" I asked. She stopped at a brass elevator. The doors slid open with a groan, revealing a cabin lit by a single flickering bulb. "Every employee wears one. Blue plastic, magnetic stripe. They're sensitive. If you find one on the floor, leave it. Don't pick it up. Don't look at the number." Her eyes darted to the mirrored walls of the elevator, especially not in the reflections. The room they gave me, Suite 412, was on the 4th floor. "Complimentary accommodation for night staff," Martha said, though her smile didn't reach her eyes. The suite was opulent but decaying. Damask wallpaper peeling at the seams, a chandelier misses half its crystals, a 4-poster bed with a mattress that sagged like a hammock, and directly across from the door, dominating the far wall, hung a full-length mirror in an ornate silver frame. It reflected the room with unsettling clarity, making the space feel both larger and infinitely smaller. "Lights go out at midnight for energy conservation," Martha added, handing me a key card on a frayed lanyard. "Yours is black. Only opens this suite and the front desk. The blue cards open everything else. Everything." She paused at the elevator. "One more thing. At 3 a.m., you'll hear the staff elevator chime. Don't answer it. Don't look. Just wait it out." She vanished into the elevator before I could ask why. Midnight came. The lobby lights dimmed automatically, plunging the space into gloom, broken only by emergency exit signs and the glow of my computer monitor. I logged into the front desk system, Aurora Grand Management Suite VO.1, and scrolled through room statuses. 87 vacant, 3 occupied, all on the top floor. No check-ins tonight. Just me and the silence. At 12:47 a.m., the phone rang. I jumped. The sound was jarringly loud in the hushed lobby. I grabbed the receiver. "Aurora Grand, night auditor speaking." Static. Then a child's voice, thin and watery. "Is Eleanor there?" "Eleanor? I don't think—" "Room 217, the voice whispered. She promised she'd read to me." The line went dead. I stared at the phone. Room 217 was vacant, had been for weeks, according to the log. I checked the system again. Vacant. I made a note. Possible prank call, verify line security. At 1:15 a.m., I heard the first key card. It wasn't a sound. It was a presence. A cold spot near the elevators. I looked up. There, stuck in the card reader of the staff-only elevator, a blue key card. Its lanyard dangled like a noose. I remembered Martha's warning. Don't pick it up. Don't look at the number. I turned away, typing furiously at the computer, pretending not to see it. But in the reflection of the monitor, I caught the card's number. 47ers. Just a glitch, I told myself. Someone forgot it. At 1:38 a.m., another one on the concierge desk. Blue plastic gleaming under the emergency light. Number 22, then 1 on the marble floor near the lobby restroom. So 9. Another taped to the vending machine. 35. They kept appearing, always when I wasn't looking directly, always in my peripheral vision or reflected surfaces, the lobby filled with them, scattered like fallen leaves. Each card felt heavy, watchful. At 2:59 a.m., the staff elevator chimed. Ping. The sound echoed in the dead air. I froze, my hand hovering over the mouse. Martha's warning screamed in my head. Don't answer it. Don't look. I stared at my screen, at the glowing cursor on the room log. The elevator door slid open with a soft whoosh. No footsteps, no voices, just the smell drifting out. A sweet, cloying scent of roses and wet earth, like the air after a grave is dug. I kept my eyes down, counted to 10, 20, 30. The doors sighed shut. The chime echoed again as it closed. Ping. Silence. I exhaled, trembling. That's when I saw the security monitor. The lobby camera feed showed the staff elevator doors opening at 3 a.m., sharp, empty. But the camera in the third-floor hallway, hallway C, showed something else. The blue key cards, dozens of them, not scattered, arranged. Laid out on the carpet in a perfect spiral, starting at the elevator doors and winding toward room 314. At the spiral's center lay a single item, Martha's name tag. I rewound the footage, watched the timestamp tick backward from 3:01 a.m. to 2:58 a.m. The hallway was empty. Then at 2:59:47, the key cards began to fall. Not from hands, from the air itself. They fluttered down like dead leaves, landing with impossible precision. At 3:03, the elevator doors opened on an empty shaft. And for 3 frames, less than a tenth of a second, a shadow flickered in the mirror at the end of hallway C, tall, thin, its head brushing the ceiling tiles. I vomited in the wastebasket under the desk. The front desk phone rang again. I let it scream into voicemail. When it stopped, a new sound took its place, a rhythmic thump, thump, thump from above, from the 4th floor, my floor. It was slow, deliberate, like something heavy being dragged across carpet. Thump, thump, thump. It stopped outside my suite door. I held my breath. The doorknob didn't turn, no scratching, just silence. Then a soft clink, something sliding under the door. I crept forward. On the Persian rug lay a blue key card, number 400. My suite number. I backed away, heart slamming against my ribs. The thump, thump, thump started again, fading down the hall toward the emergency stairs. I waited until the sound vanished before peeling the card off the rug with a pin. It was ice cold. I dropped it into the desk drawer and locked it. At 4:17 a.m., I found the staff room. I was checking thermostat settings on the 3rd floor when I noticed it. A door labeled Employees Only, behind a potted fern. The handle turned easily. Inside was a time capsule of ordinary lives interrupted. Coffee mugs sat half full on a table, steam long gone, but the smell of burnt beans still sharp in the air. A sweater draped over a chair. A phone screen lit up with a text thread. You coming to Jen's B-Day? Followed by running late, shift from hell. But it was the key cards that froze my blood. They weren't scattered. They were displayed. Taped to the walls, stuck in the microwave, wedged between the pages of a dog-eared romance novel. Every blue card in the hotel, I realized with dawning horror. Over 100 of them, each labeled with a name written in shaky handwriting on masking tape. Martha, Chen, Diego, Priya, Ben. And one on the bulletin board, circled in red marker. Eleanor. Beneath Eleanor's card hung a Polaroid photo. A woman in a 1970s floral dress stood before the Aurora Grand's original marquee, smiling wide. Her eyes were bright, alive, on the back, in the same handwriting as the names. She promised she'd read to me. She lied. The microwave beeped. I hadn't touched it. The door swung open. Inside sat a single blue key card on a paper plate. Number 1000. I ran. Back at the front desk, I called 911. The dispatcher's voice was calm, professional. Aurora Grand Hotel, what's your emergency? Everyone's gone. The staff, they vanished. There are key cards everywhere. Sir, calm down. Which room are you calling from? I'm not in a room. I'm the night auditor. Look at your logs. I don't see any active reservation for a night auditor tonight. The Aurora Grand has been closed for renovations since October. The line went dead. I checked the computer. The room log was gone, replaced by a single line of text scrolling endlessly on the screen. They forgot to remember us. Now we remember them. The lobby lights died. Only the exit signs glowed, casting bloody light on the sea of blue key cards scattered across the floor. The staff elevator chimed. Ping. The doors opened on darkness. From within came the smell of roses and wet earth, stronger now, and a sound I hadn't heard before. A low, wet clicking, like teeth snapping together. I grabbed my backpack, sprinting for the main doors. They were locked, bolted from the inside. I pounded on the glass. The street outside was empty. No cars, no people, just fog swallowing the city lights. In the reflection of the glass door, I saw them, dozens of figures standing in the lobby behind me, not solid, translucent, wearing hotel uniforms from different eras, bellhops and pillbox hats, maids in frilly caps, concierges in bow ties, all staring at me, all holding blue key cards. At the center stood Martha. Her face was smooth, blank, no eyes, no mouth, just pale skin stretched tight over bone. In her hand she held key card. 1000 da. She raised it slowly, pointing toward the staff elevator. The clicking sound grew louder, closer. It wasn't coming from the elevator shaft. It was coming from the mirrors. I turned. Every mirror in the lobby, the one behind the front desk, the ornate one by the grand staircase, the small one in the elevator bank, was rippling like water. From the glass, pale hands emerged, reaching, grasping. The clicking was the sound of their jaws working in the void between reflections. I ran for the emergency stairs. The door was propped open with a blue key card. 13. I slammed through it, taking the steps 2 at a time. On the 4th floor landing, I froze. The mirror at the end of the hall was gone. In its place yawned a dark archway, not a doorway, an opening torn in the fabric of the wall itself. Beyond it lay not the next floor, but a forest at twilight. Ancient pines, a still black lake, and standing on the shore facing away from me, a woman in a 1940s floral dress. Eleanor, from Camp Everstill, from the Ravenswood Grand. She turned. Her face was bloated, blue-tinged. Water weeds tangled in her hair. In her hand, she held a blue key card. Number 315. She smiled. You heard me calling? She gurgled, lake water bubbling between her lips. I get so lonely in the between. I stumbled backward, slamming the stairwell door shut, locked it with my black key card, leaned against it, gasping. The clicking had stopped. The lobby was silent. Dawn came at 6:03 a.m. Weak gray light seeped through the lobby windows. The blue key cards were gone. The staff room was empty, sterile, smelling of bleach. The microwave was cold. The Polaroid of Eleanor had vanished. Even the coffee mugs were clean and stacked neatly in a cupboard. At 6:58 a.m., a man in a crisp suit arrived. "Maintenance," he said, showing no ID. His eyes were the color of wet stone. "Power surge last night. Wiped all the systems. You'll need to fill out incident reports." He handed me a clipboard. "Martha quit. Didn't even give notice." "She didn't quit," I whispered. She left," he interrupted, his gaze sliding to the mirrors. "They all leave eventually. The hotel doesn't like to be forgotten." He tapped the clipboard. "Your signature here, and initial page 3. I signed. Anything to get out. He led me to the service elevator, the one that didn't chime. "Front entrance is under renovation," he lied. The elevator smelled of roses and damp soil. As the doors closed, he pressed the B1 button. "Basement parking. Your car is waiting." The elevator descended 1 floor, 2, 3. It kept going. The lights flickered. The man's reflection in the mirrored walls began to blur, to stretch. His suit melted into a bellhop uniform. His face dissolved into smooth, featureless flesh. In his hand, he held a blue key card. "1,000. "Almost there," he whispered, his voice layered with a clicking sound. I jammed my thumb on the emergency stop button. The elevator shuddered to a halt between floors. Darkness. The clicking grew frantic. Hungry, I pried open the doors with my hands. Cold air rushed in, not a basement. A narrow service corridor lined with pipes, and on the floor, illuminated by a single bare bulb, lay a blue key card. 12. I ran. Through boiler rooms and storage closets following signs for exit. Burst through a rusted metal door into a pre-dawn alley. Rain soaked through my shirt. I didn't stop running until I reached my car 3 blocks away. I drove for 2 days, slept in rest stops, bought a burner phone with my last $20, changed my name to Mark Reynolds at a DMV in Montana, rented a studio apartment above a laundromat. No mirrors. I covered the bathroom mirror with a towel. The bedroom had none. I was safe. I was forgettable. Last night, I woke to the smell of roses. The apartment was freezing. My breath fogged in the air. On the kitchen counter, beside the coffee maker, lay a blue key card. 20, still damp. Still smelling of lake water, I threw it out the window, watched it vanish into the alley below. This morning, it was back on my pillow. I packed a bag, left the apartment keys on the counter, drove west until the mountains gave way to ocean. Checked into a cheap motel in a town called Seabrook. Room 7. No mirror in the bathroom, just a curtain over the shower. I slept for 10 hours. I woke to the sound of dripping water, not from the faucet, from the ceiling. I sat up. Dark droplets fell onto the bedspread, thick, viscous, smelling of roses and wet earth. I looked up. Water seeped through a crack in the ceiling plaster, but it wasn't water. It was black fluid, thick as oil, dripping steadily onto my chest. Where it touched my skin, it burned cold, and in the puddle forming on the bedspread, the reflection wasn't the water-stained ceiling. It was the lobby of the Aurora Grand. The mirrors were gone. In their place stood archways, dozens of them, leading to forests, to lakes, to crumbling sanatoriums and rotting cabins. And standing before each archway holding a blue key card were the staff, Martha, Chen, Diego, Eleanor, all smiling with too many teeth. Martha's reflection reached out a dripping hand. In her palm lay a new key card, blank, waiting for a number. "You can't outrun what you carry," she gurgled, lake water pouring from her mouth. "The hotel remembers everyone who forgets it." I scrambled out of bed, grabbing my bag, ran for the door. It wouldn't open, locked from the outside. The dripping intensified. The black fluid pooled on the floor, spreading toward my feet. Shapes moved within it. Pale hands, tangled hair, wide, unblinking eyes. The clicking started, not from the walls, from inside my own skull. I smashed the window with the motel room chair, climbed out onto the fire escape as the fluid rose, lapping at the bed frame, dropped to the alley below, ran, didn't stop until I reached the highway, hitched a ride with a trucker hauling lumber to Spokane. He dropped me at a Greyhound station. I bought a one-way ticket to Chicago. The bus was warm, smelled of stale coffee and diesel. I took a window seat at the back, closed my eyes, listened to the hum of tires on asphalt. Safe, moving. At the first rest stop near Boise, I used the restroom. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The sinks were chipped porcelain, and there, taped to the mirror above the hand dryer, was a blue key card. 12. I tore it down, crumpling it in my fist, threw it into a trash can, washed my hands until the skin turned raw. Back on the bus, I kept my eyes closed, pretended to sleep. But in the reflection of the dark window, I saw it. The bus windows weren't reflecting the highway. They showed the Aurora Grand lobby. The mirrors were intact now, and in each one, standing just behind my seat, was Martha. Her hand rested on the headrest. In her palm, she held a blank blue key card. She was writing on it with a finger dipped in black fluid. I looked away, pressed my forehead to the cool glass, closed my eyes tighter. When I opened them, the card lay on my lap. Not blank anymore. The number was 1,000. And it was warm. That's where this story ends. Let's continue with the next. The park map shows trails that don't exist until after dark. We didn't go to Holloway Greenway for ghosts. We went for the light. Cass needed B-roll. Bioluminescent ecosystems of the Appalachian Ridge. And Holloway was rumored to host Pinellus stypticus, the bitter oyster mushroom, which glows a soft green in decay. Theo, ever the skeptic with his spectrometer, scoffed, "Moisture and phosphorescent minerals, not magic." Lena, quiet Lena, just traced the park map with her finger and whispered, "The trails change." I didn't correct her, because I'd seen it too. The official park map, folded, laminated, handed out at the ranger station, listed 3 trails: Ridge Loop, 2.1 meters, Creek Spur, 0.8 meters, Summit Overlook, 1.5 meters, all marked in clean black lines, numbered blazes, clear distances. But when Lena's flashlight beam hit the kiosk at the trailhead, just after dusk, as the last gold bled from the sky, new lines appeared, not printed, just glowing. Thin, serpentine paths drawn in phosphorescent green ink that hadn't been there a minute before. They branched off the main trails, curling into the dark like smoke. No names, no distances, just symbols at their termini. A swing, a chalkboard, a bridge, a cabin, a lighthouse, a train station, a mall, and one, deeper in the woods, ending in a single word, written in tiny looping script. Home. The ranger had warned us offhand while stamping our permits. Stay on marked trails after dark. The map, it gets ideas. We laughed. We walked. The ridge loop was easy, packed dirt, gentle grade, oaks and hemlocks, forming a cathedral ceiling. Fireflies winked, but no mushrooms glowed, just the usual summer hum. Then Cass stopped. Did you hear that? Not an animal. A voice. Faint. Layered. Children. Singing. Back and forth, hand in hand, across the dark, across the land. Theo checked his recorder. Audio's clean. No external source. It's atmospheric resonance, infrasound vibrating the trees. Lena pointed off the trail. Between two moss-covered boulders, a path, not there before, narrow, unmarked, carpeted with ferns that shimmered faintly green. At its entrance, a wooden sign, freshly carved. Swing Trail. Kamai. Loyalty required. I knew the symbol, the swing, from Lena's dreams, from Holloway Playground. Let's turn back, I said. Lena stepped onto the path. It's warm, she whispered. The ferns underfoot weren't plants. Hair. Russet. Mara's hair. The path curved, opened into a clearing. The swing set. 2 swings, one tall, one small, chains thick as wrists, seats of polished bone, moving in flawless mechanical unison, back, pause, forward, pause, empty, inviting. Lena walked to the child swing, placed her hand on the seat. It warmed. A soft, pulsing glow spread from her palm, green gold. The chains began to hum, low, vibrant, like plucked piano wires. She turned to me. Her eyes weren't hers, full of green gold light. It's okay, Daddy, she said, Mara's voice, older, sadder, wiser. They just want a friend. They get lonely. The swing needs 2, always 2. One to go back, one to go back, one to go forward, one to go forward. She stepped onto the footrest, gripped the chains, looked at the empty adult swing. Will you push me? I didn't move. Behind her, the ferns shifted, not wind. Hands, pale, small, rising, offering, palm up, waiting. The singing rose, not from the recorder, but from the air itself, back and forth, hand in hand, across the dark, across the land. The swing goes high, the swing goes low. Hold my hand and don't let go. Lena swung gently, back, pause, forward, pause, alone. But the rhythm was off, stuttering, unbalanced. The green gold light in her eyes flickered. A tear, thick, clear, smelling of burnt sugar, rolled down her cheek. They're sad, she whispered. The swing is broken when it's only one. Then my phone buzzed. A text from my wife, sent 37 minutes ago. Where are you? Lena's asleep in her room. She's been asleep for 2 hours. I stared at the screen, looked at Lena, standing on the swing, watching me, smiling. Her pajamas, the ones she wore to bed, blue with white stars, the same ones she'd drawn in her dream, the same ones in the photos on my phone. My breath stopped. The phone buzzed again. Another text. From an unknown number, no name, just a photo. Black and white, faded, a playground, Holloway Park, 1958, opening day, a crowd of children, in the foreground, 2 swings, occupied, a man in a dark suit, a little girl, blonde hair, blue dress, both smiling, the man's face blurred, the girl's clear. My daughter's face, Lena's face, same freckles, same crooked front tooth, same eyes, full of green gold light. Beneath the photo, Elias and Mara, first ride, August 12th, 1958. Mara, my mother's name. Her sister, dead before I was born, drowned in Cedar Creek, 1959. She was playing near the old bridge, my grandmother said. They found her shoes by the water, neatly placed, like she took them off before stepping in. I looked up. Lena, Mara, was still on the swing, but the adult swing was no longer empty. A figure sat there, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark suit, hat pulled low, one hand gripping the chain, the other reaching across the 6 feet of space, toward Lena, toward me. The figure lifted its head, mine, older, worn. eyes full of green gold light and sorrow, so much sorrow. Lena, Mara, reached out. Her small hand met his. Their fingers twined. The swings began to move. Back, pause, forward, pause, perfect, unbreakable. The green gold light flared. The ferns beneath my feet softened, gave way. I sank to my knees, not into moss, into hands, cold, welcoming, pulling. The song rose. Back and forth, hand in hand, across the dark, across the land. The swing goes high, the swing goes low. Hold my hand and don't let go. Lena looked at me, not with fear, with love. Come on, Daddy, she said. Mara said. It's time. The swing needs 3 now. The adult swing beside her slowed, stopped, empty, waiting for me. I stood, walked forward, placed my hands on the cold, rusted chains, sat. The seat molded to me, not metal, bone, warm, alive. Lena, Mara, reached for my left hand. The figure, me, reached for my right, our fingers locked. The swing began to move. Back, pause, forward, pause. Not 2 anymore. 3. The rhythm was different now, deeper, stronger. The hum and the chains became a song. The green gold light filled the clearing, and from the ferns, hundreds of small hands rose, clapping, gently, in time, because Holloway Greenway doesn't take children, it keeps them. It holds the ones who fell, the ones who jumped, the ones who let go, and it waits for the ones who swore on swings, on stars, on pinky promises, I'll never leave you. The swing arcs higher. The wind smells of river water and childhood, and as we rise, together, hand in hand, past the treetops, into the green gold dark, I finally understand. The trails don't appear after dark. They remember. They recall the paths we walked, the promises we made, the falls we took. And the most terrifying thing about Holloway Greenway isn't the glowing map. It's the moment you realize you were always on the trail, and the moment you finally remember is the moment the ferns begin to pull you back. Back, pause, forward, pause, back, forever.